the go live button because I'm not
Oh, okay.
100%. Did I make all the settings right?
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Screen cap. Zoom out. There we go. Perfect. I'll just give it a minute to update the stream
Awesome.
and then check with the chat. Chat, is the sound working? That is the key information. All right, it looks like we are live. So, Dr. Josh, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Awesome. Thank you very much, Tom, for having me. Yeah, so a little bit about myself. I'm a philosopher. I work at the moment as a visiting lecturer at the London School of Theology. So you can tell I'm in the UK. You probably tell from my accent as well. So yeah, I love philosophy, specifically philosophy of religion. So a lot of my research at the moment is looking at sort of, the big questions that philosophers of religion try to tackle. So the existence of God, nature of God, and some philosophical, theological issues like the doctrine of the Trinity, divine simplicity, and other things related to that. Yeah.
Awesome. So I saw your interview on Capturing Christianity, and you presented a new argument for God, somewhat related to the ontological argument. Could you tell us more about your argument and what its differences are from the classical ontological?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say so much that it's within the family of ontological arguments. I would say it's more related to if people were going to see it as being alike to something, it would probably be more like the contingency arguments that you find in sort of like the cosmological family. But yeah, the argument itself is looking at specific phenomena that metaphysicians, so metaphysicians are just individuals for your audience, just individuals that philosophers who study about the fundamental structure of reality. They try to come up with theories to try and capture what that is. And I'm looking at specifically in that interview, which is based on a paper that I wrote end of last year, which is focusing on two phenomena that metaphysicians sort of affirm and taken on board as being things that are worthy of study. So this idea of fundamentality and this idea of grounding. And so just, yeah, the snapshot idea is that there is a layered structure of reality where reality is not at a flat level, where everything's existing at the same level, but reality is hierarchically structured in that the less fundamental are structured and they are grounded by more fundamental things. So there's sort of a layered view of reality, and things fit within those levels of that layered structure. And so, yeah, so the idea here was trying to account for firstly, the non-fundamental entities that are within each of the levels, and then also the relation that connects them together, so the relation of grounding. And so I was trying to say that given a certain abductive criteria or inductive criteria, we can sort of reason, I believe, to God being the best explanation for these non-fundamental entities existing at any point in time, and also for the relation of grounding. So metaphysicians, I believe, are doing a bit of a disservice where they're saying we need to just stop at the level of, let's say, some metaphysicians will take it to be we have these point-like particles which are the fundamental entities, or the person I interacted with a lot in the paper was Jonathan Schaffer, who would take the universe itself to be the fundamental entity and everything else is derivative and dependent upon the universe. And I believe that actually, given the criteria that's assumed in the argument, that the best, I would say the simplest explanation that leads us to expect the evidence that we do are not these entities, but the entity that we postulate and call God. He's the best explanation for these things. And so we can take this then as evidence in an abductive sense for the existence of God.
So you said
that was a lot in a short space of time. Hopefully it was fine. Yeah.
You said the entities assumed within the argument indicate God. What are these entities that are assumed in the argument?
Okay, so as I was saying, there are sort of two I'll call it two phenomena. So two things that I believe require an explanation. The first is why there are any non-fundamental entities rather than none at all. So we have these non-fundamental entities. So if we just sort of paint the picture of reality, where we have, and I use this example in that interview in the paper itself. So we have reality being structured, and we're looking at just some certain things within this structured reality. Let's say we have economical theories. These are things which we debate about, we speak about, we utilize to the better the economy of certain nations. And so these things will say exist, but they don't exist just in and of themselves. They exist in a certain sense because they are grounded by the human mind. And so the human mind is the thing which is providing the grounds for these economical theories to exist. So you get rid of the mind, you get rid of the theories. But then the mind itself, and I'm just taking at all, I'm not arguing for a specific view and philosophy of mind, but just assuming something like physicalism or something like that. But let's say the mind is dependent upon the brain. And so we have the mind existing because it's grounded by the brain. And then the brain existing because it's grounded by the chemical structure of the body of the person who we might be focusing on. And then let's say the chemical structure is grounded on the quarks or whatever physicists might be postulating. So what we have is this structure of reality. And as we are descending down the levels, we seem to be getting to the more fundamental things that exist within reality. And so the phenomena then is, let's say we just, for now, the argument itself doesn't take this as the stopping point. But let's say we took the quarks as being the fundamental entities. All the other things above the quarks, so the economical theories, the mind, the brain, the chemical structure, they are non-fundamental entities, okay, because they are dependent. So to be non-fundamental just means to be grounded. So they are grounded entities. And so you have these entities existing. But then you also have the relation of grounding that ties them together. So the economical theories exist in virtue of the mind. The mind exists in virtue of the brain, and so on and so forth. And so that in virtue of locution picks out a specific relation that we call grounding. And so these entities are existing because of the grounding relation, grounding them and tying them to their grounds. And so there's a phenomena then that I'm putting forward as being something that needs to be explained as well. It's not just the non-fundamental entities at each of the levels, but also the grounding relation as well. Why is this thing existing? So we have non-fundamental entities existing, and we have the grounding relation existing as well. So that's the phenomena. And then taking on a specific criteria, so an inductive criteria that's found in Richard Swinburne's work, but it's sort of, I would say, generally an intuitive criteria. So the criteria is just, there's basically four. Do you mind me running through now, or would you like to jump in with the point? Okay, so yeah, with the criteria, so we have basically four components of this criteria. So the first component is the criterion of predictive power. This is the idea that an explanation is true if it leads us to expect the data. It leads us to expect the evidence that we have. But the main thing here, even though it says predictive, it's not talking about finding something that we haven't discovered already. It's about explanation. Is there an explanatory link between our explanation and the thing that we are seeking to explain? So what we have here is, if something fulfills that, then we should expect to find that data if the explanation is true. So that's a criterion of predictive power. And then secondly, we have the criterion of background knowledge. That's the idea that the explanation, if it is to be taken as true, should mesh well with our other ideas and other theories in wider fields. So if we're postulating an entity, that entity should be something who is of the type of entities that are taken to exist in other areas. So if I'm bringing up an idea, for example, if I'm trying to come up with an explanation, so let's run through with just a silly explanation. So I hear a door slam upstairs in my house. Goodness sakes, I'm scared. I get the blanket and say, what's going on? I say, you know what? I need to go and find this out because I'm a little bit worried. So I go upstairs and I open up my door. Also, I open up now because it's closed. I open up and I see that the window is open. It's quite windy. Now, what we would normally say is, well, if we're going with the criterion of predictive power, that let's say the entity that I'm postulating is the wind. Okay, the wind is the thing that did it. Well, by postulating the wind, it leads me to expect the door to be closed. But secondly, postulating the wind fits with the background knowledge because we take and we study about the wind in other areas outside of the explanation that I'm trying to put forward. But if I was to put for example, a ghost, or let's say a fairy, okay, a fairy that's trying to scare me, maybe a leprechaun or something, I don't know. So this thing is trying to scare me. It explains the data because it has predictive power. It leads me to expect the data. But we wouldn't say it's something that fits with our background knowledge because outside of this explanation and fictional works, other people are not theorizing about this. So it's not something I would say fits with our wider area of knowledge. But then you have the criterion of, so the third one is a criterion of scope. This is the idea that an explanation is more true if it's taken to be one that explains less. So the narrower the scope, the better. But when the only thing is that this specific one drops out of the analysis that I'm giving and the analysis that other metaphysicians would give, because we're trying to explain about all of non-fundamental reality and all of the relations of grounding that connect them. So every explanation you give, be it God or be it anything else, as Schaffer and other people do in the paper, the explanation is going to be extremely wide in scope. So that one is not so relevant if we're trying to go for fundamental explanations. And so then we have the fourth one, which is the criterion of simplicity. Now, the criterion of simplicity is broken into two sort of components, subcomponents, which is the criterion of quantitative simplicity and the criterion of qualitative simplicity. Quantitative simplicity is just the idea that a hypothesis is more true if it postulates the fewest number of entities. So again, if I have the wind, I just have one sort of physical thing doing something. Instead of if I said like there were 10 leprechauns that were trying to kill me, you're just postulating one entity. And so we're more open to take that as being a more true explanation. So the fewest number of entities is how you define quantitative simplicity. And then qualitative simplicity is that the entity should have the fewest number of properties and that should fall into the fewest number of kinds. So the fewer the kinds that the entities are instantiating and the fewest number of properties that's exemplifying, we'll take that again to be the more true. But there's a little difference between myself. So some people who are quite read up on philosophy of religion might say it's very similar to sort of Swinburne's approach. But there's something a bit different in that I take Jonathan Schaffer, who, again, I'm using his name a lot, but he's a very prominent, for your audience, he's a very prominent metaphysician, not a Christian, not a theist, an atheist, and doesn't really delve into theological issues. But he's very hot on this idea of grounding. And so he's very influential in sort of the development of the notion. But he also is quite hot on this idea of simplicity. And so he puts forward this idea called the laser, which is like a 21st century updated version of Occam's razor. So instead of the razor, you have the laser. And the laser basically says that we should have, and applying it, so Schaffer doesn't apply in the context I do, but I'm applying it to this. And it's basically saying that we should have the fewest number of fundamental entities, and we should have the fewest number of fundamental properties that are exemplified by that entity, and the fewest number of fundamental kinds that entity instantiates. And so what we have then is the idea about fundamentality. So it doesn't matter how many non-fundamental entities are. You can multiply as many as you want. Okay, it doesn't really matter, as the razor will normally have a problem. But what the laser says is actually at the base level of reality, the fewest number and the fewest kinds and properties of entities should be the thing that we are focusing on more. So it's about fundamentality. So just taking this sort of this, let's say, elevator slogan, a true fundamental explanation is one that I take to be the simplest explanation that fits with our background knowledge, that leads us to expect the data when otherwise it would not be expected. And so I believe when proper, arguments and analysis is given to it, that God, as I define him, because I do define him in sort of a unique way in the literature, but the way that I take God to be defined, he is a simplest entity that fits with our background knowledge, that leads us to expect the existence of the non-fundamental entities in our structure of reality.
Could you say that again? So he's the... To say your criteria, that one sentence again, God is the simplest thing that leads to expect the data thing?
Simplest, yeah. He's a simplest entity that fits with our background knowledge, that also leads us to expect the data. So the data being the relation of grounding and the non-fundamental entities, when otherwise, without his existence, we will not expect them to exist as well. So he is the sort of the explanatory stopping point in that structure. So if we were going down a level, we shouldn't stop at the quarks. If, let's say, we take the quarks, point particles, Schaffer's universe, that's not what the fundamental level is. They exist and we're affirming their existence, whatever it is. But we are not saying that we should stop there as that being the fundamental level, because I would say that you are able to basically park your car, your explanatory stopping point at the level where you cannot have an increase in the fulfillment of the criteria. So if you've come to the simplest entity that is fitting with our background knowledge, that leads us to expect all the other entities above that level, then that's the fundamental one. And This is not to say, though, that you could have, let's say, you can have something that's more simple than that level, but then what you might have is that there's a losing of another component. So you might have something that's more simple, but then it's not going to fit with our background knowledge. Or you might have something more simple or fitting with our background knowledge, but then it doesn't lead us to expect all the things to exist. So what I'm saying is once we have the fulfillment of those three components, we then have the level that we stop at. And I'm saying the level that we need to descend to is the level of God. So God is at that level, and he's the entity who explains all the other non-fundamental entities and the grounding relation as well. So that's sort of my argument in a nutshell, but there's sort of bits and pieces that need to be fleshed out. Yeah, that's sort of it.
Yeah,
That's
you
sort
said
of
you
it
had
in the
a unique definition of God. What is your definition of God?
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, the claim of theism is just the idea that there is a God, but I take God to be an omnipotence trope. So, it's a metaphysically simple omnipotence trope. So, what you might have a lot with sort of philosophers of religion, they will take God to be, let's say, spirit. So, for example, Swinburne would define him as an omnipresent spirit. I have others who are sort of saying maybe a perfect being. I have a problem with omnipresent spirits for background knowledge issues, and I have problems with perfect being because it's not that if you're taking that as your base level definition, it's quite ambiguous, specifically what perfection means. But the idea I've taken is that God is metaphysically simple. That means he lacks parts. So it's an affirmation of divine simplicity. So he's an entity that's metaphysically simple, lacks all parts. He's numerically identical to any attribution made of him. But he is also an omnipotence trope. Now, a trope, as you all know, and other of your audience, a trope is sort of this big idea of metaphysics that a lot of people have assumed. It's widespread. But what some of you might be scratching their head and saying, how could God be a trope? Aren't tropes particularized properties? Well, there was a development over the past few years. It was actually not development, it was a rediscovery of something. Because you had D.C. Williams in the middle of the 20th century who was sort of promoting this idea of tropes. And he was saying that this is the idea that of properties that we've had for a while, but he sort of reintroduced it into the literature. But then about 15 years ago, we had some other philosophers who realized that actually there are two types of tropes that Williams and others were focusing on. You have something called module tropes, and you have things called modifier tropes. Now, modifier tropes are just simply properties. They're properties in the real sense of the word. And the important thing about them is they are non-self-exemplifying. So they give a characteristic to their bearer, but they do not have what they give. And so you have sort of this idea of something just giving something, but not necessarily having it itself. But then module tropes, which is quite interesting, they are actually not properties, they are objects. And so when we say that trope and we're talking about module trope as a property, we're sort of using it in an analogical stretch sense of the word, because they sort of fulfill the role of a property in that they give character to something else. But they are not properties, they are objects, and they are self-exemplifying. So they have what they give. They have whatever characteristic that they are giving. So an example of this, of a module trope, would be a hotness trope. So we would say that, for example, if I touch the stove in my house and I burn myself, oh my goodness, I've burnt myself. Now, why I've burnt myself and why I've burnt myself is because there's this module trope. Let's say we're taking trope theoretic sort of theory on board. There's these module tropes that are compressing together and they've made up this stove. But you have size, you have color, you have all these things that make the trope what it is and give it its character. But then you also have a hotness thing as well. Which is this idea that the character of hotness is had by the hotness trope. So the other tropes might be modified tropes in that they give. So for example, a color trope might give what it doesn't have. It might not be colored itself. So a redness trope might not be red. Let's say my stove is red. Let's say I like red and it's red. It might not be red, but a hotness trope is hot. And that's why I'm burning myself. And so the interesting thing about module tropes is that they can stand in causal relations, but modified tropes cannot. So they're causally inert, but module tropes are causally active. So taking this idea on board, then I say, okay, there is this idea, module trope, object, self-exemplifying. Also, interestingly, both tropes are simple. So they're taken to be metaphysically simple. They're not composed of things from other ontological categories. That's generally taken by trope theorists to be correct. And then also it can stand in causal relations. So then I take that and I say, well, that's how I'm defining God. God is a trope. He's a special kind of trope. He's an omnipotence trope. But this is still not a far off idea, because tropes are also module tropes are taken to be powers. So you might have this idea of, in a lot of sort of contemporary metaphysics, about this idea of powers. And tropes, a lot of time, philosophers who assume trope theoretic theory or the trope theoretic framework, they will take tropes to be powerful entities. So they manifest in certain ways and they have powers. And so what I take then is that God is a powerful trope, like any other trope. But the difference between him and other tropes is that he doesn't have limitations to his power. So other tropes might have limited power, but all you do is just shave off the limits for this specific power trope. So you have an omnipotence trope that's metaphysically simple, lacks all parts. And that's sort of the way that I take God. And also, I mean, I don't have to go through it now, but you can get all of the other divine attributes from omnipotence itself. So you can get omniscience, perfect goodness, and all these other things, perfect freedom. But I won't run through that now. So you have this one entity, this omnipotence trope, lacks parts, metaphysically simple. And that's the definition of God that I work with in this specific argument. Yeah.
Okay, so my first question would be, based on your definition of God, none of those properties seem to fit our background knowledge. So in criteria you've presented, the predictive power, background knowledge, scope, and simplicity, it seems like all of those things you listed would be essentially synonymous with a unicorn or a leprechaun. None of these properties that you've listed of omnipotent tropes, metaphysically simple, numerically identical to any property, all of that seems, the no limitations kind of criteria, all of that seems to, none of that fits into the background knowledge we have. We have no basis to conclude any of those things are real properties other than things we've kind of arbitrarily asserted. So wouldn't that go against your criteria?
Oh, no, not at all. It depends what you mean. So just breaking down what you're trying to say, just so I understand it correctly. So you're saying the trope idea or the omnipotence trope idea doesn't fit with our background knowledge. Is that what you're saying? Or,
Yes, to me it seems synonymous with saying leprechaun or a unicorn or fairies.
why would it be synonymous to that?
Because I don't see any background knowledge for any of these properties. All these properties seem to have no basis in reality. Like I'd say properties that do would be spin, charge, mass, etc. Those seem to be properties that have a solid background knowledge. But to posit a God who's omnipotent or metaphysically simple, all of those properties seem to be kind of asserting something like magic or unicorn, Santa.
Yeah, but why would it? Because I mean, you have to walk through the definition and say how that specific element doesn't fit. So walking through it, you have tropes. So you've assumed an entity, and something just to qualify as well. And this is in the paper in a footnote, that when you're looking at background knowledge, we're looking at the type level, not the token level. And I think that could also be an issue that with the misunderstanding here. It's not the instance of the type which is wholly important for background knowledge. It's the type itself. So why we have problems with spirits and leprechauns and magical entities is because we don't have those types of entities being postulated in other areas. But you cannot limit the background knowledge criterion to the token level, because then you'll never have any new discoveries. So if I'm discovering, for example, we're trying to postulate why a certain planet is that we can see is acting in a certain way. Maybe there's a gravitational pull of another planet. And so we postulate another planet. Now, why we're postulating another planet and not just some random spiritual, let's say magical entity, is because the type of entity planet is something we already accept to be things that can exist or do exist. But then the instance itself, you cannot say that because you don't know how that planet is going to be like. You don't know how the planet's going to be operating like, given that it might be in a different galaxy where there might be different operations when it comes to that planet. So the instance is not so important, it's the type. So what we have then is the postulation of of a type, which is widely accepted. Like I said, trope theories or the entity that I'm postulating, which is a trope, is something which is widely accepted. So what you've done is that you've just looked at a specific instance and said, but this instance doesn't fit with the other instances that we normally take to exist. That's not a problem. We look at the type level, and that's how we set the background knowledge, not the token level.
Well, for me, this is a pretty big problem. Whether or not it's widely accepted or not really doesn't make a difference to me. Like unicorns and fairies were widely accepted at one point. My question would be is there any empirical evidence of this thing? I'd say no. I'd say there's equivalent background knowledge of omnipotence or omnipotent trope, metaphysically simple, as there is for unicorn or magic or Harry Potter. So I don't see any reason to think those exist, because none of those are accepted in physics. Like physics, this doesn't exist. None of those properties exist in physics. So I'd say they aren't widely accepted in any of the relevant fields, as opposed to something like quantum fields. Quantum fields, very widely accepted. Those, I think, would be something that would fit our background knowledge and would qualify as a much better ground of everything else than any of these properties you've asserted, because to me, that seems to have predictive power, explains everything we see. It has background knowledge, an incredible amount of background knowledge, novel testable predictions. It seems to have much better scope and is far simpler in my definition. So it seems like
you're postulating. Sorry, I just lost it.
quantum fields.
Sorry, say that again.
Quantum fields.
Okay, so just walking through the criteria. So why does it lead us to expect the data? So specifically the data being grounding relations and non-fundamental entities. Why does it do that?
Because it predicts everything, string theory.
No, but you can't just say it predicts everything. I'm asking about the specific phenomenon itself. So how does it lead us to expect there to be a grounding relation, not a different type of relation? Why does it expect us there to be non-fundamental entities as well that are connected in that specific way? So we've got to look specifically at the data, not just saying it predicts everything. I want it to predict that for this argument. So you need to predict that specific phenomena.
Right.
So how does it do it?
So the non-fundamental thing is that objects like particles are a result of interaction fields. So the fact that there are this fundamental thing of fields that creates the other things that are grounded from it is follows from the theory itself. So the grounding relation thing is easy. And what was the other one?
Sorry, hold on. Just hold on. Just
backwards.
So what phenomena are you looking at? Is it you're saying the non-fundamental entities?
Yes, the non-fundamental entities is explained by interactions in the field which generate things like particles and stuff.
Okay. So why would it do that? I'm saying just as you
it's part of its nature.
Sorry?
Part of its nature.
Yeah, okay, but why? I mean, I need to understand why it's part of its nature. What principles operative? Why would it lead it to me to expect all of the the non-fundamental entities, by the way, is not just saying what's within our planet or our universe. It could be any non-fundamental entity that's existing, or that possibly could be existing. It depends, obviously, your view of modality, but it's talking about non-fundamental entities, not just within our physical universe, whatever there is. So why should it lead me to expect that?
I'm not sure I understand your question here. So given the nature of quantum fields, they literally explain all of the data we see. They say what would generate everything we see in the relations that we see. Well, quantum fields would. If they exist in this way, given string theory, then our universe would be one of many universes that is a result of these fields existing in this way. Okay. So it posits it has this nature. If it has this nature, we expect to see the result that we do see. So given the predictive power analysis, it explains all of the things we see.
Okay. And to what level of explanation? So is it an entailment? Is it to a high level? Just to understand.
We could arbitrarily state it to any level we want. We can just entail it into the nature, which I think is what most
I mean, it's quite important for the analysis. So is it that it entails the data? So given that there are these things, there necessarily will be these other things, or is it that it's not so in that way?
Well, like in any theory, you can change that and just make it arbitrarily and just say it's one or the other. It doesn't actually change anything.
There needs to be reasoning behind it. So what's the reasoning behind? I'm saying just whichever one you're picking, if it is entailment, there needs to be reasoning behind it. So what's the reasoning behind whatever entity that you're postulating, so the fields, them logically entailing all the other non-fundamental entities that they are?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by reasoning here, because the reasoning seems to be just something I think that theists are just making up. I don't think you need that at all.
It's not theists. So I mean, this is just a general inductive criteria that can be employed in any way for any explanatory sort of factor that you're looking at. So it's not just theists. So I think it's not fair just to say that theists are doing that. Let's look at the predictive power, because when you're assessing explanations, and if they're very similar, how you're going to be able to choose between them is how well they fulfill the criteria. So if there's one that entails the data and there's one that doesn't entail the data, then that's going to be a big distinguishing factor between them. If there's one that's less simple than the other, if there's one that fits with the background knowledge less than the other. And so it's not just saying, okay, whatever one you want. I'm saying, give me the reasoning behind it. So I'll give you an example for the theist one, which was in the argument. So you have God being defined as a being who can do any, so he's an omnipotence trope, like I said. And from that, you get him performing any best action if there is one. Taking the diffusiveness principle, which is a principle found throughout History, it's not at the moment very in vogue, I would say, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's been refuted. But it's something that's been found widely. So yeah, diffusive principle is the idea that goodness is diffusive of itself, which seems to be intuitive. So if we have goodness being diffusive of itself, existence being a good thing, and God being a being that performs the best action if there is one, then it seems to be the case that his existence will logically entail other things existing as well. And there's not a limit to what those other things would be. So you can then say we expect there to be all these other non-fundamental entities, given that non-fundamental entity is just an entity that's grounded. Secondly, we can also expect the entailment of the grounding relation, because given that there are these non-fundamental entities, there will be a connection between God and these non-fundamental entities that are postulated. So then you will say, what type of relation is it? Well, it's a synchronic relation in that this entity is, let's say, sustaining them in existence. And so we take it to be a grounding relation, a relation that they are existing in virtue of God. And so what you have is an entailment indirectly of the grounding relation, directly of the non-fundamental entities, indirectly of the grounding relation. So I'm saying there's reasoning behind it. So I would like you just to provide me the reasoning behind, why these quantum fields or the fields you were speaking about entail the non-fundamental entities and entail the relation of grounding rather than any other relation.
Right. So my interpretation of what you just said is that you've made up a property called the goodness property, and this goodness property is kind of like the anthropic principle, and it explains all the data we see. And I can just make up a property and say there's the wiggly wobbly property, and this is within the quantum field, and the wiggly wobbly property entails all of these grounding relations. And that would seem to be equivalent to what you've done with goodness, where there's no evidence of this goodness property. It just seems to be something people have made up to fit their epistemic hypothesis. Like, you just use this property to try and answer the question of the grounding, whereas it doesn't seem to do that. It just seems to be you just made up a property to try and answer a question that you deem important. So I don't see, like, the goodness property in and of itself doesn't seem to fit the background knowledge. Like all the things you said about goodness and how God would create other things, that doesn't seem to be implied. Even if there was a goodness property, that wouldn't necessarily follow from the goodness property, or that he would create beings.
Sorry for interrupting you. Sorry for
no problem.
Just two things. Just firstly, I mean, you're talking about the diffusive principle. Is that when you say goodness property? Is that what you're referring to? Why are you saying the diffusive?
Well, I think
what's the goodness property?
Well, the diffusive principle will probably be a larger concept. I'm specifically referring to you using goodness to explain how the goodness in God entails explanations of the grounding principle and the contingent objects thing.
Well, it follows. Yeah, sorry.
I don't think it follows. Like, it seems to be an arbitrary assertion that it follows, and it would be no different from me saying the wiggly wobbly principle. It follows from the wiggly wobbly principle that grounding and contingent things exist. It doesn't seem to be. There's no connection between those two things. There seems to be like an arbitrary assertion.
Okay. So I mean, I definitely would not see that it's been the case. And first reason is, like I said, there's a principle in play here. So first, you'll need to explain about the diffusive principle just being ad hoc and brought in to explain the theological case. When the diffusive principle is a general principle that's been widely accepted in the past, you find in Plato, you find in Bonaventure and other medieval scholastics, and you find in some contemporary philosophers as well. So it's a principle that's been there. So I didn't come up with it. So it's definitely something that and wasn't brought up for a theological sort of issue as well. So anyway, so we have diffusive principle being there. So that's the first thing that you're saying needs. I brought up in an ad hoc way, but let's see. I don't really believe that's the case. And then secondly, how the goodness of God leads to this is from an entailment of him being omnipotent. So as I define God as an omnipotence trope, he's a trope that can perform any logically possible action. Being omnipotent entails that you would do the best action, because what you have is that you have an entity that's omnipotent would be perfectly free. Perfectly free means you don't have any causally effective influences on your decision making. So, for example, if I'm looking at two things and I want to eat, I mean, the sweet tooth for myself is going to say I want that chocolate cake in front of me, but the health kick in me that I may be on is going to say actually you need the Brussels sprouts. Now, what would reason decide? Well, reason, we would say, prioritizing things in my life would say preservation of my life, furthering of my physical health is better. So reason will decide that I should go and choose the Brussels sprouts. But the causal influence in me, which I would deem to be my desires, would say, no, but I really want this cake. And then I'll go and eat the cake. So entities like ourselves are free in a certain sense, but we are also limited because we have causal influences that are effective in sort of pushing us away from what reason dictates. Being omnipotent, however, performing any logically possible action, you will not have that constraint upon your choices. So any choice that you make would be a choice that is guided by reason alone. And so what that means then is that you'll perform the best action if there is one. Given that you're also omnipotent, you would know of all the truth value of every proposition in the past and in the present. Not necessarily saying you'll know of every true proposition in the future, because there might not be ones. But you'll know of every true proposition in the past and in the present, because in order for you to perform an action, you will need to know what occurred in the past and what's currently occurring at this moment. So what you will then have is that it will know the truth value of propositional statements. And so it will know what is the best action. We don't know what the best action is all the time. That's why sometimes, again, even though we're guided by reason, we end up doing the wrong thing when we should be doing the right thing. But essentially, being omnipotent will not have causal influences, so it will only be guided by reason. It will know the truth value of every proposition, so it will also know what's actually the best action, if there is one, or the equal best action, or just a good action. And then it will be guided in that way to perform that action. So what you then have is then taking existence to be a good thing. So something existing being a good thing, it will then be led to go and bring about this thing existing because it's a good thing. And so it wouldn't have any causal influences that would be pushing it away from doing that. So it will just logically entail, inevitably, that it will go and do that thing of bringing about good things. So bringing things into existence. So I'm not understanding then how there won't be non-fundamental entities in that way, because that wasn't just a postulation. It was stemming from the definition of God as omnipotent and then leading into the data that we see.
I don't see how that's not a postulation, because it seems like you've made up this criteria of omnipotent and you have entailments that it also entails omniscience and omnibenevolence in some sense, not literally. But I would say that that's no different from me saying I define the quantum field as having the wibbly wobbly principle, which entails the goobly woobly principle. And so it seems like if I just entail all these new made up definitions that don't have any evidence, I can add definitionally into these new properties that they explain the data or whatever, but that doesn't make it evidence. That doesn't make it actually count as a good explanation. It just means I've added in a new property which I've made up and has no evidence for, to literally just define it as an explanation of the data, which seems to be, from my perspective, what you've done. I don't see any reason to accept omnipotence as a thing. That seems to not fit our background knowledge. Again, I don't see the goodness. I don't see goodness, how that fits into our background knowledge. I don't see any evidence of that anywhere in physics or anything. Quantum fields, spin, charge, mass, I see all of those things have a significant amount of evidence that qualifies as meeting the criteria of being background knowledge. But I don't see anything that makes omnipotence or goodness. I didn't critique the diffuseness principle. I didn't object to that. Just the property of goodness being something that you could apply the diffuseness principle to get an explanation of grounding and contingent things. That seems to be arbitrary. It seems like me saying you can define the wibbly wobbly principle as explaining grounding and contingent things. Just seems like you can arbitrarily assert it and just apply the diffuseness principle to it because you've given it in the definition. But that doesn't mean it actually follows. It just means you've made up a definition. So again, I'm not seeing how either goodness or omnipotence has any evidence that would make it fit the background knowledge criterion that you provided. It doesn't seem to have any background knowledge. Like I don't.
So I mean, the problem I'm sort of seeing is that you're limiting background knowledge to the area of physics, when I don't see there should be any reason to do that.
How so?
Because we're looking at the metaphysical data. So if we're looking at metaphysical data, shouldn't we take into account other things in the field of metaphysics, and then we look at other neighboring fields outside of metaphysics?
How do you establish what is background knowledge and what isn't? Like, for example, I assume you wouldn't think anything we come up with a definition for wouldn't necessarily qualify as background knowledge. Like you could come up with a definition of leprechaun that wouldn't count as background knowledge. So how do we differentiate things?
No, I mean, yeah. So obviously the limit of background knowledge is difficult itself to sort of say this is where we can demarcate the line. But I think it's quite plausible to say, well, start first with what field are you taking data from? Well, you're taking it from metaphysics. So let's first look at the other theories that are taken to be true in the field of metaphysics, see if it meshes with those. And then if there's a additional element to it, you can then take other fields in let's say physics or other things like that. But I would say that's actually how people should be operating. So even giving a card to the atheist, I would say when we're looking at physical data, so it could be, let's say, a cosmological argument, we would say, let's first look at the background knowledge in physics, because that's the data that we're looking at. We're looking at something that's accounted for in physics. So then we're going to look at the things, the other theories that are found in the physical, the field of physics, and then we're going to, maybe if they're important or relevant to the activity of explanation, we will then look at other fields that might have some relevance. But I'm not understanding why you've located at the beginning point background knowledge being at physics when we're looking at the metaphysical data. So I brought to you two things that studied by metaphysicians: fundamentality and grounding. So why are we saying background knowledge is found there in physics when we can look at metaphysics and see tropes to be things that are, because anyway, I mean, physicists aren't postulating tropes. Metaphysicians are doing that, and they're doing it widely, and they're applying it to physical theories. So it's something that's widely accepted in metaphysics. Because then, if we're operating with the same sort of limited amount of background knowledge that you are doing, or stringent sort of limit to just the area of physics, then you're not going to do a lot of metaphysics, which a lot of philosophers say we can do metaphysics, because they're not first saying, well, we're postulating something that we find in physics, and then we can then say, sort of, how does it work in our metaphysical theories? That they're postulating things that are at the fundamental structure of reality, which physics doesn't study. So we're looking at the fundamental structure of reality at a general level, not just at the physical level, but at the general level, what's fundamental. And then we're trying to postulate the best theories that account for this within the field of metaphysics. So I'm not understanding why you've taken background knowledge to be, again, focused on physics rather than metaphysics.
Well, I think science does have to do with metaphysics. I'm a scientific realist, like most scientists and most philosophers, so I think science does tell us about metaphysics. I think it is a more accurate definition of metaphysics than literally anything else we can come up with. I think so. I don't understand what other things would count as background knowledge at an equal or greater level than science. To me, that seems like the best thing to use as our standard as background knowledge. And I don't understand why we would accept anything else. Everything else, especially in like philosophy, seems more speculative, more just like wibbly wobbly principles and goodness principles, just stuff we're just kind of making up. I don't understand why that would be taken as something we should accept as background knowledge, because we could just have alternative theories of metaphysics. Why would those be any greater or lesser count as background knowledge? Because it seems like we could just make up any theory we wanted as long as it had some grounded in previous philosophers, and then we could just count that as background knowledge. It seems rather arbitrary, whereas science at least has a criterion of differentiating the real things versus the imaginary things, where I don't see that in metaphysics or previous philosophical works. It just seems kind of just a la carte, make up what you want, grounded in Platonic realism, if you want. Okay, it's fine. That counts as background knowledge because Plato did it, kind of thing. I don't think that's a really good criterion. So why should we, in your view, accept anything beyond the scientific scope?
So, I mean, I don't think metaphysicians operate in that way. So you won't find a lot of Platonists in sort of the contemporary field of metaphysics. But my problem I will have with what you're saying is, yeah, science can have some um, say in the field of metaphysics, but at the end of the day, it's not identical to the field of metaphysics as data which is not studied by the natural sciences. So, for example, the grounding relation, that is not something that's postulated by physicists. However, it's widely accepted by prominent metaphysicians that this is a relation that's, number one, worthy of study. Number two, seems to exist because it plays a part in metaphysical explanation. So the same way that causation, and I don't think we'll be saying causation doesn't exist in some sense, but causal laws, and let's say the laws of physics, they operate because in the fields of physics, and we take them to be things that are true because they play a part in causal explanation. The metaphysical laws and the grounding relation plays a part in metaphysical explanation. And it seems to be the case that if you do not postulate something like grounding, you are not going to have a lot of paradigm examples being explained away, because so a lot of metaphysicians, just for the audience, they'll start with, we seem to have these paradigm examples in reality. So, for example, something like simple as Socrates and his singleton set. What's the relation between Socrates and singleton set? Well, it seems to be the case that there must be some relation to them, but it's an asymmetric relation. Socrates explains the set that he's a singleton of, and it's not the other way around. And what best captures that is this relation of grounding. So grounding seems to be something that is postulated to exist in reality. It is something. And so we're taking metaphysical data, which is not studied in science. But if I'm taking your specific way of doing philosophy and metaphysics, then we shouldn't even look at the grounding relation, because it's not going to pop up in any scientific theory. So again, I think you're limiting metaphysics to just one area of or one interpretation of metaphysical sort of theorizing, when the contemporary metaphysicians who are working, this has nothing to do with theology or theism, they are working in the field of contemporary metaphysics, wouldn't take your approach. So for example, E.J. Lowe, who passed away in 2012, very prominent metaphysician in various areas, and nothing to do with theology. I think he had one thing on the ontological argument, but it was like a side project, so don't count him away for that. But yeah, so he would define, and a lot of people follow him in defining that actually metaphysics, because it's a study of fundamental structure of reality as a whole, it is the thing which science itself is dependent upon, because science is studying reality, but it's studying a certain part of reality, which is physical reality. But what we have here is there needs to be metaphysical theories that are in place in order for science to work. So for example, if you look at truth maker theory, or theories of truth itself, like correspondence theory of truth, those are things which are metaphysical things that we are theorizing about, which are then assumed within a scientific context to then operate. And so what I'm trying to say to you is that we have data and we have theories that metaphysicians have in their field. Physics might have a part to play in that specific theoretical role, but it's not going to be identical to the study of metaphysics. So when we're saying fit with our background knowledge, I'm still don't feel I've had an answer, because I feel you're making a lot of assertions as well. I've given you reasoning from omnipotence to perfect freedom to goodness, then to giving the diffusive principle the existence of the non-fundamental entities. So in that chain of entailment, being omnipotent, being perfectly free, then being perfectly good, where is the break in the chain? That there's a problem there. Because I would say the wiggly, I don't know what you called it, the wiggly wobbly or field, I don't know what you called it. Again, that's something that anyone can postulate, because something to say as well, and I think there was an erroneous reasoning in your part, was that you were doing a posteriori work at the explanation forming phase. The explanation forming phase is an a priori task. So we first have these explanations. So I'm putting forward this idea of God, an omnipotence trope. I'm then going to test it. So this is the a posteriori sort of part of the explanatory task. I'm then going to test it according to the criteria to see then if it fits with our background knowledge, leads us to expect the data is simple and all those sort of things. So I'm not understanding why, because you can postulate this wiggly wobbly principle, postulate it, but then you'll need to show me why this wiggly wobbly principle, even though it can lead us to expect the data, because it will, why it then does fit with background knowledge being the wider field of metaphysics and not just the field of physics, and then it being simple quantitatively and qualitatively. So you'll need to walk through each of the criterions to show me where there's a better fit and where the ad hoc reasoning in my part is, when I've shown that freedom, goodness, and then the entailment of the non-fundamental entities of grounding relation follow from the omnipotence trope.
Right. And so my argument would be is that for something to qualify as background knowledge, we need some criteria to differentiate. Yeah. Does it correspond to reality, the truth theory, or is it just something we've made up? Can you differentiate imagination from reality? And if you don't have that, then it's just arbitrary. Anybody can just make something up. There's no difference. And so I would say that the way to do that is science. Science has a way to differentiate imagination from reality. I don't see any reliable way to do that in metaphysics at all. I like, if I'm talking about the fundamental nature of reality, I'm talking about physics. That's literally all physics does. What is the fundamental nature of reality? And so even though I agree that there are things that are prior to physics that we haven't discovered yet, like causation, grounding, whatever, I would say that the only thing that qualifies as a good explanation of what those are is what the most fundamental thing we know about in physics is, fields. So we could say, if there is causation, what is causation? It's probably an interaction between the fields. That's probably what it is. You can't go any baser than that. We can't posit anything that is more fundamental than the most fundamental thing we know about in physics, because that's the only thing we have reason to believe is actually real. Everything else is just speculation. And so from my position, for it to count as background knowledge, we need to have that additional metric of this can be differentiated between imagination and reality, and novel testable predictions in science does that. I also wanted to mention, I disagree with the was it the predictive power scope? I would always consider that to be post hoc in the way you've presented it, where it's just explaining the data as we see it. It's anthropic principle. Everything does that necessarily. So in order to count
just
as
to understand it correctly, can I just understand what criteria were you talking about? You said
predict,
scope and predictive. You brought
predictive
them
power.
together. What?
So
Predictive power, sorry. Okay.
So predictive
What was your
power
issue?
leads us to expect the data. Like if I say there's a gold brick in my basement, and if a magic leprechaun exists who likes to create gold bricks, well, that would explain the data. But that's not very good explanation, I would say. If you want to say that's a good explanation, you need to predict something in the future that we don't know about yet. If there is a magic leprechaun in my basement and I give him a cookie, then he will create a gold brick, and then I give him a cookie, and if a gold brick appears, then that's good. That's good predictive power. I'm happy with that. But just being able to post hoc explain the data, I don't think that matters at all. Everybody can do that. You should make up whatever
So it
definition you
doesn't
want.
matter. So if I'm in a court of law and I'm trying to understand who killed someone, and I put forward an explanation of David is the one who had the knife, we saw, his blood and all these sort of things were on the knife, and all these sort of CCTV camera footage found David. That's talking about something in the past, evidence that we collected in the past.
Yeah,
But
this would
then
only apply to
can't
new
operate that
things.
way.
Well,
Sorry.
right. So this would only apply to things that we don't have like empirical evidence for. If we have empirical evidence, that's background knowledge. So like David had a knife and was on CCTV footage, totally fine. But if you went into a courtroom and said there's a magic leprechaun who stabbed David, you're going to get thrown out of the courtroom. Like, nope,
Yeah,
there's no precedent for that.
Yeah, but I mean, you keep on saying something you said before. Sorry, that I wanted to say. So you're saying a good explanation about the leprechaun in the basement, and then this one now. But you're not defining what a good explanation is, because a good explanation is, yeah, you can put forward. And I think you are. I think there's problems with what you're saying about you can draw line. I don't know where you're demarcating the line between something being a good predictive explanation because it explains the data that we have, and one that's leading us to expect things in the future that we find. Because again, I was saying to you that we do utilize that all the time to explain things. But where your problem would be is because, yes, why we would throw that out to the court and why we would not postulate the leprechaun in the thing is because it doesn't fulfill the other criteria. So it doesn't fit with background knowledge saying there's a leprechaun. That's why you're throwing out this specific individual as being a plausible type of entity, or it could be about simplicity or something like that. So that's the issue, but you haven't shown me, and I'm still saying again, you haven't given me reasoning why I should say limit it to physics, because you're saying it does things that are like, it postulates things that are real. So would you tell me then that tropes aren't real because physics are not postulating that? So metaphysicians don't take tropes to be real.
I would say the concepts in metaphysics, like tropes, grounding, causality, are abstract concepts that, if they exist, would correspond to some physical entity like a field. And
so how does tropes do that?
No idea. I'd say it's probably some kind of a field. If it exists, it's some kind of a field, and that's the best explanation.
You can't make that assertion without actually showing how that's the case. So it's again, that's a basis assertion. So tropes are taken to be things which are taken to be real. So using your terminology, real, because they have explanatory value, because they play a role, for example, in causation. Tropes are a better explanation than universals because they can stand in causal relations. So if I see a yellow flower, why I'm seeing that yellow flower is because that yellow flower has a particularized trope or particularized property or a trope, which is a bearer of which we then are standing in a causal relation with. But universals are not taken to be things which are causally active, and so that's why we will not say that we would postulate universals to do any wrong in reality. And so why philosophers take tropes is because they have theoretical value, not because they're found in the field of physics. So you're making the assertion, unless you can show me how tropes fit or do not fit with, because you're saying that they will more than likely fit with something in physics. You need to show that to be the case, because I haven't made assertions without trying at least to show how it's been the case. You can try to you say my reasoning's flawed, but I'm not making just an assertion and saying, well, it must be like that. I don't think why that should be the case. So we have tropes being things that are postulated by philosophers widely, and that's not studying the field of physics. And I was just really trying to understand why I should take then your criteria of background knowledge, because then that should just get rid of tropes and other things that philosophers are postulating.
Well, it would get rid of them as independent entities, that's for sure. So I would say that because the vast majority of human things that we come up with within our head are purely imaginary and don't exist, the default thing is anything that has been come up with by human imagination is imaginary and does not exist. And the things that we know are beyond just our imagination are physics, the science. The science has a good reason to believe this is something that is true and exists independent of our imagination. And so these abstract criterion like grounding, tropes, causality, it seems just a priori, or technically a posteriori because of our knowledge of how imagination works, that these are probably just abstract criteria that would have to correspond to some existing thing, and our concepts probably don't do that. They don't exist on their own. There's probably something, if these ideas do describe something, it's going to be some field in reality, because that's the best evidence we have. And so my evidence would be, to answer your question, is that because most of the things humans make up are purely imaginary and don't describe anything, then it's most likely to include, if it doesn't have any independent evidence that it is a real thing, it's probably just a made up thing, just like all the other made up things.
Yeah, but it does have independent evidence. It just might not be found in the field of physics. So my problem was trying to say, can you please just show me
Yep.
how these things which are taken by contemporary metaphysicians to be things which are real, using the terminology real, but they're not found in the field of contemporary physics. So my problem is that you're just saying that it must be like that. But what is, I mean, you're saying it's going to be like that because of the success of science or physics. It's going to be like that. That we'll find some correlation between these entities. But at the moment, we haven't. And philosophers are still postulating them to be real. So is your criteria then correct?
Yes, because all the things we have confirmed have only been confirmed in science, and there's no other domain, as far as I know of, that has ever been confirmed. But I would say that, like,
Yeah.
the reason I think that is because, like, to go with your courtroom example, my epistemic grounding here would be is that for something to count as background knowledge, it needs to make novel predictions. You got to be like, if you're going to posit anything that doesn't already have or hasn't already made novel predictions in the past, you need to make new novel predictions about the future, things we don't know yet. Like, if I give a cookie to a leprechaun, he generates a gold brick. New stuff. Just the ability to post hoc explain the data doesn't give us anything, because that's just problem of underdetermination. Literally anyone can do that. You can explain all of the data with infinitely many hypotheses. Just doesn't accomplish anything. So in order to evaluate the better theory, you need to be able to predict something new. And then if it can predict something new and gets it right consistently, well, then it counts as, well, now we have this theory is now background knowledge because it's successful. It's done something to...
Hold on. I think you've misunderstood the criteria. So you're
Well, I think
bringing
I'm
two...
disagreeing with you on what
No,
your
I'm saying you're
definition
bringing
of them.
components together. So you have something having explanatory value, which everyone would agree anyone could come up with anything. So the leprechaun idea could, like I said to you, even when we were walking through this, I said, if I'm upstairs, which one is going to be the explanation? Is it the ghost or is it the wind? The ghost explains the door being closed. If there is a ghost that wants to kill me, it might want to scare me before it does that. And so it explains the data. So you have something having explanatory value, which is an independent criterion. Then you have fit with background knowledge. But you were just saying to me that fit with background knowledge is its predictability in the future and its explanatory worth. So for me, it seems to be that you brought these two things together when they are to be held independently. Because first you need to, because if I'm so walk through that example of the wind and the ghost.
Well, remember, you said in predictive power it does not include future predictions. It's just explaining the past data, right?
No, it doesn't have to. So yeah,
Right.
the main idea is about its explanatory value. So the explanatory value of something in the past, my door being closed, the wind and the spirit. Well, we're going with the wind here, but why do we do that? Because they both explain the data. Well, the reason is because we don't accept spirits within our background knowledge. But then how can that be the case when there should be, because if I was going with you, the spirit could predict things in the future. So anytime that, oh, another door hits, oh, that's the spirit. Oh, another door hit, that's the spirit. Maybe there's going to be a door that hits there, and that's the spirit. So, for
That would
example, if I
not fit in my... So mine is novel predictions. You have to predict something we don't expect yet. Like, if you could predict the doors closing with a high degree of accuracy with the spirit hypothesis, yes, I would count that as a novel prediction. But I would say that the background knowledge, for anything to count as background knowledge, you need that other aspect of the predictive novel power of predicting new things we don't know yet. And if it can do that successfully, then it fits into the category of background knowledge.
how is that how people operate? Because if we are discovering other entities, and we're putting forward, and we don't know the entity yet, but we're postulating the existence of something, we then are going to look at other areas where there are entities that are similar to it. So we will say, okay, there's this entity in this field, there's this entity in this field. Okay, postulating this entity meshes well with these other things. I don't understand how predictability has anything to do with that. Predictability doesn't play a part there. So even if you want to add prediction to to the first. I think the best thing for you would be to add predictability to the first criterion, because if you put it in the background knowledge, then there might be many things that explain things that happened in the past, but they're not going to explain things that happen in the future. So, for example, they don't exist anymore, something like that. So you postulate an entity that explains something in the past, but it doesn't necessarily explain something in the future. So if we have an individual who went and killed someone, and all the evidence points to this individual, okay, but let's say we have his name, we don't know what he physically looks like, so we don't have physical evidence of him, but we have some sort of evidence that points towards this individual over the other individuals. We would say that his postulating his existence explains that specific thing happening. But then let's hear, oh, this person killed himself. So that means he's not going to then do anything in the future that we can predict. So then, should we postulate that thing or not?
Yeah,
Because we're
because
not going to have background knowledge.
it's the types versus, I forget what the other term was. If we have the type of human being and he was in the past, then yeah, that's background knowledge.
You come back to my place then. That's exactly what I said.
Right. So I don't disagree with all of the terminologies, but there are many that seem to be pretty obviously wrong. Like I agree that.
Sorry for interrupting. I really don't want to be doing that. Sorry about that. Yeah, I was just saying, but you're literally doing that. So you are utilizing what I said in the past. That what we would say, yes, why we take this entity instead of some boogie monster doing it is because the type of entity that's postulated, human being, is something which we regularly take to exist in other areas of knowledge outside of this case that we're looking at. And so what I'm saying to you then is not to do with predictability, it's type fitting.
Well, no, I'm saying that the type of human being has successful novel predictions that have been made, and so the type of human being fits background knowledge. Therefore, saying that Bob killed someone and then killed himself is fine because that's already in our background knowledge. So I would say background knowledge is things that we have previous empirical novel predictions for. So dogs, people, horses, whatever. If you say I saw a dog, that's reasonable to believe it has background knowledge because the category, the type of dogs had successfully made testable predictions in the past, so it's in their background knowledge. If you said I saw a unicorn, there's no empirical data of unicorns, that would not fit our background knowledge. So that would not, even if you could use it to explain your phenomenon of what you experienced, would not be a good explanation. This is the same way it works in a courtroom. If it has empirical data in the past, it has precedent. And if it doesn't, then it's thrown out of a courtroom. So in the case of any hypothesis, if it already has an empirical scientific basis, it has background knowledge. If it doesn't have background knowledge. And so even if you can make up a hypothetical way to explain the data, like leprechauns, gods, whatever, none of that fits our background knowledge until you can make it get novel testable predictions. And then if you can get it to make novel testable predictions, then it can fit our background knowledge and you can use it as a hypothesis. But until it does that, it always seems to fail the background knowledge test.
So if you're postulating an entity who, let's say, we don't have a lot of data about the type of entity doing things that lead us to expect novel things to be happening in the future, we shouldn't postulate that entity.
We can postulate it as a hypothesis, but we wouldn't be reasonable to believe until it can confirm the future things.
No, but can we take it as a working hypothesis?
It depends what you mean by working hypothesis. Like so a hypothesis, I think you can make up a hypothesis for anything you want.
No, it's an explanation that we're working with because it's the best explanation at the moment. Can you do that or not?
I don't think so. I don't think it can be the best explanation if it's just a working hypothesis in that sense, because as we both mentioned, you can just make up any hypothesis to explain the data. So I don't think it can be the best hypothesis until you get the novel predictions that are confirmed.
The best hypothesis that we have available. So, I mean, if we had limited physics, for example, with your sort of viewpoint, if you had limited physics on a matter, but we had loads of, explanations from, let's say, the theological realm about something, but we have limited physical data about this entity that we're postulating, would we favor the limited case or would we favor the one that's more wider, the wider case that you find in the theological realm?
I'm not sure I'm understanding your question there.
So what I'm trying to say to you is, my problem is that you are, I think, changing what the understanding of background knowledge is, because background knowledge is literally that simple, just to say, does this type of entity fit with other entities that we postulate and theorize about in other areas of knowledge? That's literally that simple. But now you've added another component, which normally isn't taken to be fitting with background knowledge, that also it shouldn't just fit, but it needs to have predictions in order for us to take it on board as something meshing with our background knowledge. So what I'm trying to say to you is, if that's the case, then you open up a lot of can of worms, because you could have spirits, for example, who are defined in a certain way to make literally predictions, but the predictions are better explained by the nature, by the natural case. So, for example, let's say I have all my windows open, and one case was my door hitting, closing. Another case was my cupboard door closing, or something else falling off. Now, I could say, look, there's a, this, my explanation works because it explains my door slamming. My explanation also works because, look, didn't I bet my book, or my porcelain vase, which is on the edge, is going to fall over in a few minutes. I know it's going to, and then it falls over. And I say, look, the spirit did it there. Wouldn't that be predictability? But you would obviously say, but sorry, we have the wind being able to also explain that. The wind explains this. The wind explains it also happening there. But why we're taking the wind as the explanation and not the spirit or the leprechaun or whatever is because something like the phenomenon of wind fits a lot better with other things that we are theorizing with. Because the problem is, if you're going with your thoughts, the leprechaun does have predictability. But why we're not favoring it over the other one is because of meshing with other things in wider areas. That's why we just throw it out. And that's why you'll normally throw out an explanation where someone just gives a dragon or something like that, because it doesn't fit with the type of entities that we take to exist, even though it could have explanatory value and even have some form of predictability.
Or I'm pretty sure I agree with like everything you said there. Yeah, we prefer the wind because you're not predicting anything new. There's nothing novel about saying the wind will cause a door to close. So like if you could predict,
I didn't say the wind will cause doors to close. I didn't say that. I said the leprechaun will. So
right. I apologize.
Yeah, so that is a novel
the door will
prediction.
close. The door will close. There's nothing novel about saying the door will close. Doors close all the time. That's a very common phenomenon. It's like predicting the sun will rise tomorrow. What?
Yeah.
Oh, so like if I said I believe in the leprechaun, if the leprechaun exists, the sun will rise tomorrow. That's not a novel prediction. You're predicting something we already know about. If there's some phenomenon that you're predicting that's a very common phenomenon that's already explained, that's not a novel prediction. For it to be a novel prediction, you have to predict something we don't know about yet, something that's not already explained by other data. So like if I said, I have a magical leprechaun friend, and he will close all of the doors in my house on command, and I can give him a command and he'll close the door, and it happens every time with a high level of reliability. That would be good evidence of a leprechaun. That's okay, fine. That I can't explain that by the wind. The wind doesn't seem to follow your commands. That would be good evidence of a leprechaun. Just the doors closing would not be, because wind could already explain that. But if you have a novel prediction of some new phenomenon that we don't know what caused yet, and you can accurately predict the future of when and how this phenomenon occurs, that would be evidence of spirits or leprechauns or whatever. I'm totally happy to admit that. I'm happy to say, if you can make novel predictions and have a hypothesis of God or leprechauns or fairies, and it works to explain the future data that we can't explain yet, you have more evidence for your hypothesis than anybody else does. But I don't see this as a problem. So like,
I think I don't know maybe what we're arguing about, but so yeah, just drawing the argument back, because I think we went off. So we have the criteria there. You said predictive power. You have a few problems with that because you think it needs to have predictability, or you were saying the background knowledge has to have that. And then we have simplicity as well. So just going back to then the phenomena that's under analysis. So I was saying to you fundamental entities and grounding relation. You were saying to me quantum field or something like that. You were saying that is the explanation. So I was trying to just say, please, can you tell me first? Because at the end of the day, I'm not talking about data that is going to occur. I'm talking about data that does exist now. So going with the first criterion of explaining the data, how does it do that, please? And can it do that? And this is my original question. Can it do that to a level of necessity, in that it necessitates these things? Just as the first thing. You could say yes, and that's not a problem. But just I'd like to understand why it's the case.
I'm not sure what you mean by why here. I can just say that it's a fundamental part of its nature that it would necessarily create everything we see.
Yeah, but why would it be that? That's what
fundamental part of its nature. I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, why would you take that as a fundamental part of its nature that does all the things that
certainly
create
by definition? I'm just going to say it's by definition.
Yeah, hold on. So, I mean, again, you're using the term create. Well, you're using the term create. That needs to be specified what you mean, because there are different relations that could be part of that. So, why would it be a grounding relation? That's a synchronic relation where things are existing in the here and now. Why would it be that relation and not a diachronic relation? So, a relation that operates over time. So, there's existing, and then over time, it brings about this thing. over time brings about this thing, over time brings about this thing. Why would it be a synchronic relation, not diachronic relation?
Well, the time thing, I think space and time are emergent from field, so I wouldn't think it's.
No,
I
no, I
think
don't have
it's.
a problem with it doing that. I'm just saying, why would you choose synchronic relation over diachronic?
Or I could
Why
just
would it
pick it definitionally and say I'm going to pick this one. Like I don't see why. Like,
hold on.
well,
So
I'm apologize. Just to
yeah,
clarify, I'm trying to mirror your position. So it seems to me that what you've done is you just arbitrarily
yeah,
defined it this way, and you can do that with any position. So I don't see any problem with me saying I can arbitrarily define my hypothesis, whatever it may be, with the same definition. I don't see why we could
yeah.
test which one is more likely to correspond to the, what did you call it? Not the diachronic, or the other one?
So synchronic relation.
Synchronic. Like it seems like we could just apply synchronic to any hypothesis we want. We're just going to say it's synchronic, and then they all have equal qualifications to count as synchronic as the God hypothesis. I don't see any reason why quantum fields would be less plausible to be able to be called synchronic than a God would. It just seems like we could just defining whatever we want in that way.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well, I don't think it was analogous what you were saying. So, because I postulated the definition of God as this specific entity that would do these specific things, then independently of that, there's a working principle. And independently of that, there's an assumption which can be counted, but the assumption that existence is a good thing. So, given these three things, the definition of God is a being that would do good things if there is one. The diffusive principle saying that goodness of itself would be diffusive. And then the third thing, existence being a good thing, you just have them all together leading to there being these entities that exist in this way. So there is definition and two independent things. Now, I want you, if you're saying it's analogous to what you're saying, definition and then two working things that lead to these synchronic relations, so grounding and non-fundamental entities.
Okay, definition is the definition of a quantum field, whatever definition you want to come up with, which has a synchronic relationship or whatever, and has the, I don't know what you mean by working principle. The assumption, it's an assumption. I can just make up the assumption that it has this nature or whatever. So would you like to clarify what you mean?
Diffusive principle. So I'll say the working principle. So definition, just understand. So definition, God, omnipotence, trope, does good things. Then you have working principle, diffusive principle. And then you have existence, so a third thing, which is an assumption that existence is a good thing. So these three things lead to the relation and the entities existing. So I'm saying if you're saying you're mirroring this, you need to do the same thing.
What is
because if I define God as an entity who brings about grounding, or entity that brings about non-fundamental entities, then it will be doing what you're saying, but that's not what happened. There are three things working together. So if you can allow me to understand that, so you have definition and say quantum field, whatever that is, and then you have these two other things or whatever that leads to relation of grounding. So grounding relation specifically, and also the non-fundamental entities.
Yep. Could you explain what does the diffuseness principle accomplish in this hypothesis? Just to.
Sorry.
What your working principle of diffuseness? What does that do? What does that add?
So it just means if something's good, if something's taken to be good, then it's going to bring about other good things. So if you don't have that, so let's say you get rid of that principle. Then
can you say that one more time? If something is good, it will bring about more good things.
Goodness is diffusive of itself. So if something is good, then it will diffuse that goodness in certain ways. Okay, it will just manifest goodness. So if you just have, let's say, God, and you don't have that principle, then you can have a God who would do good things, and you can have good, let's say, existence being a good thing, but you don't have the idea that it will inevitably do good things. So it could just be having the character being a good person, but not actually bringing about good things around itself. So the principle is just basically saying, well, from given this principle, there is an entailment then that given that this entity is good, it will then bring about good things, which will include existence of other things. And so what I was trying to say to you with your sort of mirroring of this, you'll then have to show quantum fields, whatever the quantum fields are, then some reason why the quantum fields would be active in this specific way to bring about non-fundamental entities and the relation of grounding with them as well. And not another relation or not another sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay, so it seems like basic modus ponens. God is good. If something is good, it will diffuse. Existence is good. Therefore, if it will diffuse into goodness or something like that. So I'd say that the definition of the quantum field is it has the wibbly wobbly principle. My working principle is the potato diffuseness principle, in which something is wibbly wobbly, it will diffuse itself, and existence is wibbly wobbly. Therefore, the wibbly wobbly principle will diffuse itself into the existence.
Yeah, Tom, that can't be serious.
Well, I don't see any difference between what you did and what I just said.
Why you see it's different is because, let's say we just go with your principle. Who has postulated that principle outside of you and outside of this context?
Why does that matter?
What we know of. So the potato, whatever principle is, it comes from Tom. But this is a principle which is assumed to be working by philosophers. And so it's something which is taken on board independently of this specific context.
Clarifying question. Does the diffuseness principle only apply to goodness? I don't know much about it. What?
Yeah, generally it's taken to be the idea that the nature of goodness is just that it's diffusive, that it just brings about the good things. I mean, it seems to be a bit evident. I mean, if you're a good person, you're not going around, punching old ladies and things like that. It seems to be that you're helping old ladies and doing things like that. So it seems to be like when you are good or whatever is good, it just seems to manifest good in other ways. So,
okay, well, I would say that's it seems quite arbitrary to me. Like I don't see any evidence for that being an actual thing, and so I would say that from my perspective, I don't think the fact that other philosophers in the past like this principle is more evidence of this than the wibbly wobbly potato principle.
Yeah, because number one, I think there's an error. It's an a priori principle, so I don't know why you would say there is evidence that needs to be grounding it before it can be taken on board.
Well, if it's an a priori principle, couldn't you just posit any a priori principle? Why would one be better than the other?
Yeah, sorry. So it's postulated in an a priori sense, and then you can go and see if it's outworking in certain areas. And it seems to be the case that goodness is something that does diffuse itself. So what I'm saying to you is you postulated your wibbly wobbly potato principle, okay, a priori, you just came up with it. And then let's go and see if it's actually something that's taken to actually be manifest in a certain way that it is outside of our context of dialogue. So outside of me speaking to you about grounding, is the diffusion principle something that's taken to operate? Yes. Is your principle of wibbly wobbly taken to operate outside of our context of dialogue here? No. So again, I'm trying to say to you that I don't see how that's analogous.
Right, I follow you now. So
you gave me an analogous principle to this diffusion principle that helps your case, then I would say I'll accept that. But at the moment now, it seems like there's just parodying when there's no grounds for parodying.
Right, I get it. So your symmetry breaker is the fact that goodness is something we see in reality causing some effects that we can observe. Therefore, it's more reasonable than the wibbly wobbly principle. I don't see that. I don't see any evidence of goodness anywhere in the universe. Like it seems to be more like a word we apply to things humans do because of our feelings, to take the subjective morality route. That seems to be more plausible than that the goodness diffuseness principle is a real thing. I don't see why we would think that the goodness diffuseness principle was a real thing. And secondly, even if it was, like I'm a moral realist, so I like morality. I don't see why we would need to posit it in the nature of a God. It just seems kind of arbitrary.
No, but I'm not postulating it in the nature of God. I'm postulating it as a principle that's just assumed to be working. And then given that God has this specific nature of being good, it will lead then to this specific result, given this principle. So it's not part of the nature of God, this principle. That's what I'm trying to say to you. So you have this principle.
I think you said in his definition was goodness was entailed in the omnipotent, he'll do perfectly good things or something.
Sorry?
You said like in the definition of God, he is, in the definition of omnipotence, it entails he will do good things or something along those lines, perfectly good things.
So yeah, so he'll do the best action if there is one, equal best action if there.
Right, so that's all I meant by goodness is in his definition. I was just referring back to that part. So it seems like I want to change my parody here because I understand more about your argument now. So my parody would be quantum fields have innate energy movement in them. My working principle is that innate energy movement is a thing that interacts in reality, which we can demonstrate through physics. Therefore, the quantum field will lead to all of existence as we see it.
Okay, and why would they be grounding these things?
Which part of that is your new argument? Because I don't see the grounding thing anywhere in the definition of working principle.
I said that well, firstly, to be non-fundamentals, to be grounded. So that's the first thing. Secondly, there'll be a grounding relation that connects these entities. So why should then this principle and this entity you postulated lead to there being grounded entities and a relation of grounding that connects them?
Could you work that into the part I'm supposed to be mirroring? Because the parts you said I'm supposed to mirror are the
Sorry,
definition.
I didn't get that last bit. Sorry,
Yes.
I
So,
got.
can you try to work that into what I'm supposed to be mirroring? Because you said that the things I'm supposed to
Yeah,
mirror are the definition, the working principle, and the assumption. So I have a definition, I have a working principle of, and I have an assumption.
yeah,
What else do I need to mirror here? Like, or could you put grounding into your argument so I can figure out how to mirror it?
yeah. No, I mean, so when you were saying that last bit that you said, it will then lead to all these other things that we see. So if it's going to have any relevance to the specific phenomena, so you can bring this principle if you want, and bring the entity. If it's going to have relevance to the phenomena, it needs to explain that specific phenomena. So why there are grounded entities, not just caused entities, and why there is a grounding relation and not just a causal relation or some other type of relation between them. So why would it be that?
Where does that fit in into your argument that of because so your argument has three parts: definition, working principle, assumption. I can mirror those things. Where does that grounding thing fit into your argument?
So I mean, it's taken once you have the definition, you have the principle, then it leads to this specific way, this specific phenomena. So what I was trying to say to you is, if you can then show me how that leads to that specific phenomena. So let's say taking on board this principle, then taking on board your entity, how does it lead to the specific phenomena?
It's in the definition. So in the definition of the quantum field, it has this principle, and this principle leads to the assumption of the existence of good or whatever.
No, sorry, I don't think you answered. So I'm saying the phenomena that we're looking at, okay, the phenomena that we're trying to explain is why are there non-fundamental entities? That means entities that are grounded. So why are they grounded entities, and why is there a grounding relation that connects them? So if we're taking your hypothesis and you're taking my hypothesis, we're trying to say, given our definition, given the principles that we're now assuming, why does it lead to there being this specific phenomena over another specific phenomena? Like that's what I'm
Yep.
trying to understand with your.
How does your model do that?
Sorry.
How does your model answer that question?
Okay. You have this entities.
What? Yeah, yeah. We broke up for a second there. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sorry. I thought I lost you. Did you hear what I said? Sorry. Or
Yep.
did you hear what I said?
Yeah. Start over. So how does your
Sorry.
model explain the grounding relations thing?
Yeah. So you have omnipotence trope. You then have this trope given diffusiveness principle entailing there being some entities. But then given that this entity is entailing these specific entities, we then need to say there's a relation between them. What's the relation between, let's say, the non-fundamental entities, and what is the relation that is then connecting them? So what we can then say is that there can either be, or there can be both, a diachronic relation, and there can be a synchronic relation that sustains them in existence. But the question would be then, why would an entity sustain those specific entities in existence without a certain form of intentionality behind it? So what we then have is an explanation of intentionality playing a part in the sustaining of this specific entity. So it being a sustaining action, you will then have a synchronic relation in play, and not just a diachronic relation. Because it could be, for example, if we took diachronic, it could be, okay, this entity just brings out good things and then kills them or destroys them, and then brings out good things and destroys them, brings out good things, destroys them. So what you'll have is diachronic over time. There are these existence being sustained in existence. So what I was trying to say to you is we can have that with the intentionality idea here with this specific trope, but something that's non-intentional. Why would it be like that? Why would it not be quantum fields just bringing these things, boom, and then going out of existence, boom? And so you have diachronic, but you don't have synchronic.
Okay, so it seems like you said synchronicity equals intentionality equals sustaining. Those all seem arbitrary.
Sorry, that last part I didn't hear. Sorry.
Yeah, so you brought up three new terminologies: synchronicity, intentionality, and sustaining. And those are they all connect or follow in some sense. Those seem to be arbitrary to me. It seems like you're just adding in new definitions that I could just replace with a different principle, the woogly boogly principle, instead of intentionality, and say that synchronicity is a result of the woogly boogly principle, which equals sustaining. And why would that be any less plausible than your insertion of intentionality there?
Because it's entailed from this. So, I mean, what I think it's something you didn't show me, you didn't explain to me before is when I've run through this argument, I've said omnipotence entails this, entails this, entails this, entails this. Being omnipotent entails intentionality. So it's not just a ad hoc thing to say, oh yeah, you know what? I want to explain the data, so I'm going to bring in intentionality. I'm going to bring in this. I'm going to bring in that. But what's happening with your parodying argument is that you're literally doing that because you're not showing why then this wobbly wobbly whatever thing it's called entails all of these things. It just follows from the nature of these things. Because I'm not defining and saying omnipotence trope who is perfectly good, perfectly this, perfectly this, perfectly this. I'm saying being omnipotent leads to being in this specific way, leads to being in this specific way, leads to being in this specific way, just from being at the base level omnipotent. So just from being the base level of quantum field, how does it lead to all these other things? That's what I'm trying to say to you.
Right. So the what you mentioned before is that you don't see how the wibbly wobbly principle entails intentionality, and I don't see how omnipotence entails intentionality. So it seems like it's just an arbitrary assertion that you've given a noun, omnipotence, and then you've defined it as entailing these things, which seems arbitrary. I don't see omnipotence as entailing any of the other things, omniscience, omnibenevolence. I don't
Okay, so
intentionality, but it
okay,
seems
one
like
second. Yeah.
go ahead.
So run through that and tell me how it doesn't. So how doesn't it entail it when I've already said that being omnipotent entails that you would know the true value of past and present propositions? Um, which would you agree with or not? So we can walk
No,
through them.
no. So I would say that'd be like omniscience. Omnipotent just means the ability to have the power to do all logically possible things. Essentially, you don't need to know anything for that. Just having the
So how would
power
you
to do
how would the
something.
power be exercised?
What
How would the power be exercised?
you don't need to exercise it to be omnipotent. The power to
Sorry.
do something doesn't
Yes.
necessarily mean you do the things. It just means you have the ability to do the things.
Okay.
For
So how would you
example,
have? Yeah.
well,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah.
Continue.
So just because I know what you're gonna ask, so like
Yeah.
you imagine a god who's asleep. A god who is asleep has the power to do everything, but he's unconscious, so he's not doing anything.
So just so you're saying it's the ability can be dormant. That's what you're basically saying. You don't
Yes.
have to exercise it.
So you can be
But
omnipotent without omniscience.
then would it have the ability to go and exercise something if it wanted to?
Yes, just not
Okay, so then
exercising
how
it.
would it do that? So, for example, if you have this dormant god or this dormant being that's omnipotent, that then wants to go and create a world, how would it create a world if it doesn't know how to do that? Or let's say, or a better example would be create a third world war. Is that possible? We would.
I'm not following. So if it's asleep, it's presumably not wanting anything. It's asleep.
So would it have the ability to do that?
Yes,
Sorry.
it has the power to
So
do
it'll have
so.
the ability to create a third world war.
Sure.
Okay. Now, would it also have the ability to form the intention to do that?
I don't understand the question here. So
So would it have the ability to form the intention to perform that specific action?
the ability to form, it has the power to do so.
Yes.
So yes, it has the
Yeah.
ability to do
So,
so.
okay, good. Yeah. So then it leads then. So if you're following what I'm saying, if you have the ability, for example, to let's say create a world or do something like this, but it's dormant. Okay, so it's not exercising at that moment. The question was, does it have the ability to exercise those things and form the intention to do that?
Yes.
And we would say yes, because it has no limit to its exercise of power. So the question is then, if it just could stay dormant, could it stop itself from staying dormant?
Sure, it has the power to do so.
Yes. And so if it could stop itself from staying dormant, then how does that not follow that it won't be dormant? Sorry.
Well, having the power and exercising the power are two separate things. So having the power
Then
to
it
do
will,
so doesn't mean it's
yes,
going
but
to
then
do
it,
so.
but yeah, yeah. But then you've opened up yourself to saying that it could want to exercise this specific thing. Because if it has the
Well,
power
it could exercise the power to want to do the things, but the wanting and the
yes,
exercising are two different things. So, for example, you can have an omnipotent thing with no consciousness whatsoever, just an omnipotent
yeah,
field.
okay. Really?
Yes,
So it can do anything logically possible.
yes. It has the power to create any logically possible state. Yes.
Okay, so can it think?
It has the power to create a mind where it could think. Yes.
No. So can it think itself, not create a mind to think?
It
So
has the
can it
power
think?
to create a mind for it to think if it wants, or if it
No, no,
can. So,
no, hold
yes.
on, no. Those are two different actions. It's saying, can it think and can it create a mind that those are two different things. So it's
Uh,
logically possible for something to think. So then the question would be, can it think, or does it have to create a mind to be able to think?
I don't see those as different. Like if you ask, can God think? He has to create a thought to think it, right? So I don't see those as different. Like if
You didn't say create a thought. I didn't say how he forms the process of thinking. You were saying he has to create a mind, whatever this thing has to create a mind first, then it creates the thoughts, and then it's thinking.
I don't
But
I
there's
don't
an
see the
action before
difference.
the creating. Sorry.
I don't see the difference. Like God creating a thought out of his thinking power, and the
Yeah.
field creating a brain, creating a thought. I don't see the difference.
Okay, so can it have, okay, same thing? Can it then think without having this specific mind that you postulated? Can it think without doing that?
I guess so. It could create thoughtness stuff, like idealism, I guess.
Sorry.
As a physicalist, I don't think that's
So can it?
possible. But
Okay.
if it's logically possible, then yes, you could. The field
So
has the power to generate thoughtness stuff.
yes. So can it think without creating something? So without creating, so not creating thoughts or things like that, but without creating something that enables it to think. Because those are two different actions I'm trying to say. So you're talking about creating something and then it being enabled to think. And then you're talking about thinking itself, it being innate to itself that it's thinking. So, I mean, we can obviously say my table in front of me, okay, is inanimate, it doesn't think. And then, but even to, so one second, I'm even trying to understand it. So to even create something to enable it to think, it has to think.
No,
So how not so? Tell me,
well,
explain.
quantum fields, you could randomly generate the brain in the vat, or no, the Boltzmann brains. But whether or not it actually thinks or intends to create it doesn't make a difference to its power to create. It has power to create whether or not it intends anything. The power
Yeah,
is the same.
okay. So then how would it exercise those things? So my question is about exercising. So my issue
Well,
isn't so much saying, yeah, sorry.
apologize, just to interrupt.
Yeah,
Whether
that's
or
fine.
not something can exercise is irrelevant to the amount of power it has. So the amount of power, its omnipotence is there, whether or not the exercising is there or not. So it doesn't make a difference whether or not it exercises or the means it has to exercise. That seems to be like a completely separate question.
I don't think so, because what I'm trying to say, I think how we were led here was through the omniscient sort of issue, if I'm correct. So that bringing about, like I was saying, the Third World War, bringing about something that's contingent upon the past, it would seem to be the case to be able to exercise that specific action. It will need to know that there has been a Second World War or a First World War to be able to do that. So what I'm trying to say to you is that they will need to know the propositional value, the truth value, sorry, of these propositions of things occurring in the past to be able to exercise that token action instead of some other token action. So that token action amongst the type of actions it can perform.
I don't.
Um,
I'm not following.
yeah,
So like a quantum fluctuation in a nuke in Russia causing it to explode could start World War III just fine, and the quantum fluctuation has no knowledge of World War II.
yeah. So when we're talking about it's actually exercising its power, it's exercising its power in that specific way to that specific token. So it being able to, let's say you have the range of actions that it can perform, it's choosing, or let's not say choose, unless you're saying in your definition you have choice or something like that. So you have these range of actions, and it's performing that action over another action. It will need to know that if it's going to exercise this specific thing, so non-intentionally. So you're speaking about things that are non-intentional. We're assuming to be. So I don't think you're assuming now these things are intentional. So these things are non-intentional. If it's having that action in its range of action over that specific action, how would there not be some form of intentionality that allows it to choose that one over the second or third one?
Like, are you asking, does it have the power to create a choice, essentially? And then I would say it can create consciousness. It has the power to create a consciousness in itself, and then make a choice. It just doesn't do it. So if the field has the power to create a consciousness in itself and then make a choice, like I want to start World War III, have an intention of some kind, it has the power to do so. It just didn't do it.
Okay. So just with all of this, and I don't know if we're arguing so much in a point that we actually that far apart. So okay, if we take then whatever this omnipotent
Field.
now quantum field, and so is that what you're saying is the thing on the table, omnipotent?
Yeah. So my
field?
argument is that you can have omnipotence without omniscience, and so there could be an omnipotent field with no knowledge. It has the power to create a brain which has all knowledge. It just doesn't, and so it has omnipotence just fine
Yeah.
without omniscience.
Okay. So then how would that then taking that, so accepting your thing and I'll accept my thing, and let's say how are we then going to say it leads to that specific data that we're looking at?
The grounding data.
Grounding data, grounding entities, yeah. Grounded entities, yeah.
Right. So I'd say the synchronicity is entailed in the wibbly wobbly principle, which is by definitionally in this field.
So sorry, I didn't that last part I didn't.
Right. So the synchronicity entailment of grounding is definitionally in the wibbly wobbly principle of the field, which is sustaining everything.
So we just your terms, I'm losing track of which one's wiggly, which one's this. So
I feel the exact same way about your theory. Yes.
No, I'm trying to understand. Are you talking about the explanation, or are you talking about the principle? Just so I understand. So you're saying it's in the explanation.
I'm not sure. So I'm just trying to go back to your terminologies. Because like you just said, I'm lost in the terminology of your model. So I'm just trying to find the correct noun that you're using and just replace it with the correct mirrored noun in my model. So from my model, yours has a definition of God who is omnipotent, which entails goodness. And then you have a working principle of diffuseness, which goodness will diffuse itself, and existence is good. And so it will diffuse itself into existence. And then there's a synchronicity principle where the working principle entails this outcome. Now, my model is that there is a quantum field which has the wibbly wobbly principle, and there's a working principle that the wibbly wobbly principle will diffuse itself, and there's a synchronicity between the principle diffusing itself into, or there's an assumption that existence entails wibbly wobbliness, and there's a synchronicity principle between the working principle of the wibbly wobbliness will diffuse itself and the assumption that everything has this wibbly wobbliness. I'm trying to mirror it as much as possible.
I'm getting lost with the wiggly wobbly and stuff. But okay,
well, wibbly wobbly is just replace good in your argument with wibbly wobbly and replace God with quantum field, and it should be just mirrored 1-to-1.
Okay, so quantum field wiggly wobbly entails the grounding relation and the grounded entities. Okay, so we take it on board. Then predictive power, saying okay, somehow it entails it, somehow this one entails it, and then background knowledge. This one fits with yours, yeah.
Well, I don't think either of ours fit with my definition of background knowledge. Your definition,
So I mean, a general definition of it meshing with other types of entities are taken to exist.
Right. So I think I would object to that definition. I'd say simply the fact that other philosophers have posited something does not make something qualify as background knowledge. And if you accept that principle, I would say that is a weak principle to accept. And so that's where I think we would differ and object in our models, is that I would say that is a weak principle to accept to make something a plausible explanation. And I think a better background knowledge definition is science.
Okay, so I mean, I think we're going back to that issue at the beginning, but I think that's a problem in that you are really narrowing the idea of background knowledge. And it's not just saying, and I brought this out in the article, it's not just saying postulating, so this specific philosopher held to this, but it's saying that these are working theories. So these are taken to be having explanatory value in other areas. So it's not just something that we postulate and Plato, Aristotle, whoever Aquinas held to. They're saying these entities, these types of entities that are postulated, are they utilizing contemporary metaphysics and are shown to provide explanatory value in those specific theories for a specific metaphysical issue? And what I'm saying to you is, I don't think your science one works, because number one, does that. So I don't think I've encountered a lot of people who say background knowledge in metaphysics is just scientific knowledge. And then secondly, again, I just don't think when it's fleshed out that way that you've shown good reason not to take the meshing with working theories and other fields.
Okay, so what do you mean by working theories, explanatory value, and science would not fit either of these things?
Okay, so I don't know. Have you seen the paper? Just so if not, it's not a problem.
Yes, I don't remember it.
You might not remember. I don't know if you have it in front of you. Okay, so so you have this idea of tropes. Tropes, number one, like I was saying, is affirmed by philosophers, but
that's what I'm asking about. So I'm asking about, like, what is your standard of affirmed by philosophers, what makes something a valid working theory or having a valid explanatory value? Like, how do we establish a theory that qualifies as these things versus one that doesn't, to me, that's
Yeah.
where I brought in the, oh, well, just other philosophers accept it. That seems to be the criterion. What is the criterion for these things?
Okay. So, for example, like I was saying with tropes, so we have, let's say, perennial debate, realism versus nominalism when it comes to this idea of properties. Tropes have been postulated and held by a lot of philosophers because they seem to have the value of giving us some form of property realism, in that tropes are able to function as things that are universal like entities without postulating universals, which can be problematic. And so you have, let's say, a very important sort of understanding of this idea of realism and nominalism when it comes to properties. So philosophers will postulate in that specific way. And off the top of my head, I can't remember the philosopher, but yeah, I think I brought it out in my paper. So tropes have also been brought up in specific areas. I think, if I'm correct, in general theory of relativity, I think tropes are brought in by a philosopher to help clarify a certain debate within it. But I will refer people just to have a look and the citation on that specific one. And then there's other areas where tropes are brought into this idea. So even an idea of understanding what, at a metaphysical level, things like quarks are. Philosophers like Peter Simmons will say that actually the best understanding of this, if we're looking metaphysically, is that these entities are trope-like entities. They're not, universal-like entities or other types of entities. So there is, and that's just a snapshot, but there is more. So I do say to your audience, if they can access the paper, do go for it, because there are different areas that I say that it's not just philosophers holding to it, but they're utilizing it for their theoretical worth, and that's why they're taken to generally be accepted.
Well, I don't think I
But you
wasn't
can run with it.
objecting to tropes. So like I can
Yeah,
grant tropes and just say the Wibbly Wobbly principle is a trope. So I don't have to object to tropes there.
yeah. But how would it be a trope? Sorry.
What do you mean?
You have to run, as I did in the paper, you have to run through what makes a trope a trope. So tropes are abstract entities, particularized natures, so they're identical to their nature. And then you'll need to run through each of those things to try and show how it's a module trope as well, how it's a modified trope. So, there needs to be argument given there for why there's a specific conception that can be taken on board. Because you could just easily say, because someone even, who's of a theistic disposition could say, well, actually, why are you taking God to be a trope when he's defined normally as this? And I'll say, actually, God seems to fit into the category of something that's a trope when we look at the understanding of God and the understanding of a trope. But then I'm saying to you, with the wiggly wobbly principle, why should someone grant that that entity is a trope?
Well, why would it be required to be an abstract entity? Like I would say that depending on your
Yeah.
definition of metaphysics, abstract entities could just be a human definition that corresponds to something physical like a field or whatever. And so it doesn't seem required that tropes have to be ontologically abstract objects. It could be more like a trope is a label we've defined, which is abstract, that corresponds to some non-abstract concrete thing.
Sorry, so abstract, as in the trope theoretic case, is not defined as abstract in the way you're saying. So I understand abstract, you're saying an abstraction of something. Is that the way you're seeing it? Yeah. So tropes aren't understood in that way. They're actually concrete entities in that specific sense of abstract concrete distinction. But abstract just means that an entity that doesn't comprise its whole location. So for example, a table you have in front of you, that's not a trope and it's not abstract because it comprises its whole location. But when you have a trope, tropes are things that can form into compresent bundles. So you can have a weight trope and a color trope and all these sort of tropes compressed together to make a table. So D.C. Williams and Keith Campbell and other philosophers who, sort of brought trope into the contemporary literature, said that actually abstract is understood in that specific way and not in the way of an abstraction. So it's not understood to be an abstraction, if that's what I mean.
I have no idea what that means. I don't.
Go look up. It's not my own stuff. Go look up D.C. Williams. Go and look up Keith Campbell. And that's the way. So it's a misconception when the term's used abstract in a trope theoretic case. It's not to do with an abstraction. It's to do with, I was just saying to you, something that doesn't comprise its whole location. So an entity that's concrete in that specific sense is one that does comprise its whole location.
And the reason we should accept this is because other philosophers accept it.
We're going to go back and forth on that, but you got to go with the working definition of tropes. So if you want to take it up with me, you can take it up with me, but I take it up with the people who came up with the idea of a trope. in the contemporary literature. I'm just repeating what's been
Right. So I'm going back to the question of why
yeah.
should we accept tropes in this definition as background knowledge just because other philosophers accept it? Because I don't think
Oh,
it's required.
no, I didn't say that to you. So
Well,
I
right.
didn't mean.
I'm not asking this a question. I'm asking.
Oh,
Is
okay.
that the
Sorry,
reason?
sorry. Yeah, sorry, sorry. Can you just repeat what you said?
Why should we accept tropes as background knowledge with this definition of trope?
Okay, because these specific entities play a part in our theorizing within metaphysics. So, for example, like I was saying to you about that realism nominalism debate, it is tropes understood in this specific sense, which are playing that specific role. And that's why they're understood to be tropes. And so, yeah, I would just say to you that it's playing a role in other areas of metaphysics, and it's taken to be a working explanation of certain issues within debated fields in metaphysics, and so that's why it's taken on board as background knowledge. But yeah, so I mean, normally I would say to you that that's what I think we agreed with in part that meshing the type of something meshing well with other types of things is part of background knowledge, and so it's the idea that the type of entity which God is defined as being is a trope, and then tropes are entities which are taken to be things which are widely theorized about and utilized in an explanatory, fruitful way in other areas outside of our discourse.
And why can't you just make up different tropes like wibbly wobbly trope?
Because then you'll need to show me how it has those specific characteristics for it to be a trope.
But if I could do that, then it's fine and it's equally as good as God.
But then but there'll need to be reasoning behind that. So there needs to be reasoning why it is, because we'll lose an understanding of a field. So the more you make it into this wibbly wobbly sort of fictional thing, the more we'll lose an understanding of what it is as a field. So then you'll have to drop field out of its definition. So
I don't know what you mean there. So like,
so I'm saying, okay, we have an understanding of, or whatever understanding we're going with the field, and then you're adding other things to then fit with this specific idea. But then by it fitting with this specific idea, we will then seem to lose what we are meaning when we're using this specific word of a field. So I'm saying what you'll need to do is show how a field as defined in a specific way fits all of the criteria for being a trope defined in this specific way.
right. I
And
mean, so you're saying that there's a contradiction in that sense and a field can't be a trope for some reason. Why?
no, yeah. So I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm just saying it will need to be shown how it does fit this. We'll need first a definition of a field, whatever working definition there is, and then need to walk through each of these things and say how a field understood in this specific way fits with each of these things that makes it into a trope.
Right. And so I'm saying that just like I've done in our past 2 hours, I think I can take each of the nouns used in whatever epistemic like ordering you want, and I can just switch the nouns with new nouns and probably get the exact same epistemic structure of an argument, except just replace God with wibbly wobbly and just make it not conscious, not intentional. And I don't see why there would be a problem with that.
I mean, the problem will be is because you'll be losing, again, just repeating what I said, you'll be losing what we have already agreed to be whatever definition we have. So if we're going with this understanding of a field, which I think you were saying you want to have that. So you have a specific understanding of a field, okay, that we're assuming. Then does a field fit with the criteria of being a trope? Would it do that successfully? If it does, then you can call it a trope. If it doesn't fit with it, then it'll be an ad hoc supposition to go and say, well, I'm just calling it a trope anyway. So
Right.
what I'm trying to say to you is the way that it's been is that someone could say, well, does God fit with this idea of a trope? It seems to be the case that the understanding of God that we have does fit with these specific criteria for being a trope. So yeah, I mean, my main thing was, yeah, we'll lose a hold of the first thing that we've already agreed with it being a field if we're then adding all of these other suppositions to it. That's what I'm seemingly postulating. But it will need to be shown. It will need to be shown.
Right. That's why I asked you: is it can a field do those things? Could it
Well, I
potentially?
don't know.
Is it?
I mean, yeah, it's your postulation, so you'll need to show me.
Well, I don't know what the definitions of tropes are. I don't know what all the criterion are, or I don't know what all the terminology is there. But I would bet that I can do to all of those terms and every single one of those criterion exactly what I've done in the past 2 hours, flip the nouns and find a new property that is equally as justified to qualify. Because to me, it seems arbitrarily, definitionally just making up new terms to fit the hypothesis in the way that you want. And so I imagine if we went through each and every one of those criterion, I could do the exact same thing I've been doing for the past hour and just mirror it one for one and show that you can just get the exact same hypothesis or exact same level of epistemic justification for a hypothesis that is completely separate or divorced from the God concept, because all it is, it seems definitionally like what we've been doing for the past 2 hours.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it hasn't been shown, so I'll wait for you to show it to be the case. And then, because I mean, obviously, we can imagine, I can imagine it not being so that you won't be able to show it. So we'll just have to say, for then argument's sake, at the moment, I don't think there's grounds for taking this field to be a trope.
Yeah, yeah. So
And
I would ask
yeah,
if you have time, could you find like anything in the definition of trope that you think would not be, or the best candidates for things that could not do
yeah,
that to? And that
yeah,
one would be interesting. Like if I can take the time to look at those, I can probably
yeah,
come up with a model to do that. So if you have time just to send me like a few examples of what you think would be the
yeah,
hardest ones to do that with, I'll definitely.
yeah. If you can go with so in my paper there is or I'll send you a paper where I explicate sort of the contemporary notion of a trope quite fully. So it's on Divine Simplicity one. So I'll send you that. Have a look through it, and then I'll look forward to
Awesome.
seeing sort of the thing.
Thanks.
But yeah, just with that background point then. So if we don't then take it to be a trope, then can we say the wiggly wobbly field at the moment is something which is taken to be an entity that exists within wider fields or is theorized about?
You mean in other fields of philosophy? No, because I literally just made it up.
Okay, good. So good. So I mean, what you're going to have then is that you don't have it with the background knowledge at the moment. So for the argument, you don't have that.
Right, but I would say that just the fact that other philosophers like the idea doesn't make it qualify as background knowledge. I would not accept that as a sufficient reason to accept it as
But you
background
remember what I
knowledge.
said. So it's not other philosophers like it. It's has a theoretical role. So I mean, the same way, for example, if I have a postulation in physics, it's going to have a theoretical role. Maybe the role of physics might be predicting data or things like that, or meshing with our observations. But it's going to have a theoretical role. And so, does this postulation that I'm giving have meshing well with other things that are taken to have a theoretical role in the field of physics? We would take that as being something that's quite important and not just something completely out of the picture there. And so what I'm saying to you, if it doesn't fit with metaphysics and we're looking at metaphysical data, so not physical data, we're looking at metaphysical data, how can you say it has fit with background knowledge then?
Well, I'm not seeing the difference between has a theoretical role and philosophers like it. What is the difference between those two things?
Because it has explanatory value. So, for example, tropes are, I was just saying to you before, tropes are taken on board in the nominalism realism issue because they have explanatory value in giving us what we want for universals without the baggage of universals. And so philosophers like it because of that. It's not philosophers like it first and then they're just postulating that. They're saying, actually, we have these ideas of tropes. We can get nominalism, but we don't have to have all of these universals around, and we get all of the things that universals give us. So it has a theoretical role. So I'm trying to ask you, whatever field that you're postulating, what theoretical role would it play in other fields?
I'm sure I could make up some. I don't think like it
Yeah,
seems to me like
I'm
the
making up things. That's the problem. So
well,
you're
well,
making up. I'm not making up.
well, I think the tropes are literally just made up things. I think those are made up things. Those are
Okay.
things philosophers have made up, and I don't see them as any more plausible than other things that other philosophers could make up. I don't think
Yeah.
that because tropes were made up in the past and people like those made up things that they're better than the wiggly wobbly made up thing just because it was earlier.
Yeah.
I don't see that as a significant differentiating factor there.
But
Like,
I think
so I would argue that I can probably make up an alternative to tropes, which is wibbly wobbly, and just change some of the properties around to do the same thing, or reject some of the properties and tropes and say this is a better thing, the wibbly wobbly thing.
okay, but if it has, I mean, obviously it's silly because obviously the name itself is silly, so that's why it seems to be a silly thing. But if you had an entity that you postulate that does a better role than tropes in that specific area that we're looking at, so the issue of nominalism, realism, then that entity can be one that might be favored. But obviously, because it's a semantic issue that you're bringing up, because you're bringing up wibbly wobbly, it sounds just silly. So obviously, whatever you're postulating is going to be a silly explanation. But that's how we operate in philosophy. We would bring forward ideas and we will try and say, does it explain the things that we take to need explanation? So things bearing properties, it seems to be quite basic to the fundamental structure of reality that entities bear properties. So bearing properties, what are these properties? And then you have the debate: are they universals? Are they tropes? Are they something else? And so they're playing a theoretical role in giving us an understanding of what these things are taken to be. So I don't think you've given me something outside of a semantic argument at the moment, because you haven't postulated, firstly, an entity that is taken to be something that's existing in other areas and theorized about, and not just liked by philosophers, because I'm not emphasizing that point. I'm emphasizing it having a theoretical role outside of our discourse. So, firstly, it has to do that. Secondly, um, then when you take that on board, you will then have to say, well, does it have value in that specific context? Do these entities, are they taken to have value? And can they even shed light on other areas? So I was saying to you, I'm so sorry that it does leave my mind, but it's in the paper. But the philosopher I'm speaking about is showing how tropes actually have a part to play in explaining at a metaphysical level the sort of issues with general theory, relativity, and other things like that. So it's tropes are playing a part in our metaphysical theorizing. Are your whatever you're postulating is a type of entity playing a part in that? I haven't had a yes answer from you, and I'm not seeing then how you have this fit with background knowledge, keeping into account that we're talking about metaphysics and metaphysical data. If this was an argument again about the cosmos, then fair enough, I could say, well, of course we're going to take into account what scientists say about things. But I mean, just so I'm not saying that you might do this, but if you look at like dialogues between atheists and theists, a point that atheists will normally bring up is saying, well, or someone like a theist might say as well, oh, this scientist, they brought forward this theory that confirms this and shows this thing to be correct in that I'm postulating, or what I'm postulating fits with what this specific, and they'll bring a specific scientist to do that. And that's not seen as problematic. So I'm not seeing why it's problematic in the metaphysical realm, when it's not just that Schaffer likes grounding. No, its grounding has a theoretical role. That's why it's taken to exist. Tropes are liked by Simmons and Williams and all these other philosophers. But why are they liked? Well, when you look at their works, they play a theoretical role. And so I'm asking you, how does your entity play any theoretical role that we can then go and say it fits in the metaphysical background knowledge?
Right. So my argument here is that I think that if we go down the road of trying to explain the theoretical role and its importance, we're going to lead to the exact same thing we've been doing for the past 2 hours, where it's going to be definitionally, and I can just make up a new definition and it'll be equally justified. I think that the theoretical role as a criterion of whether something becomes qualified as background knowledge doesn't count. It's just a weak principle. I think that what counts as background knowledge is, again, I'd go with science. Science counts as background knowledge. And the reason we can say, I bring up this scientist and his work is not because of some theoretical role, it's because novel testable prediction. There's science that backs up that claim that we can do in a lab and repeat it. And that's why we take that seriously, not because it plays some theoretical role in explaining something. And so my main objection to these kinds of arguments would be that I think that if we continue down the same path of mirroring linguistically all of the different words used in the argument, we're probably going to get to the same thing, because the whole point of what I've been doing is to try to show that there's no symmetry breaker between a hypothetical just wibbly wobbly principle and a goodness principle of a god, because you can always just make up new definitions and there's no way to differentiate which one's the real one and which one's just something people have made up. And I think the same thing is going to go turtles all the way down, essentially, and we can just continue that process throughout the entire field of philosophy to get to the same conclusion, that there's not really any way to differentiate between these different theoretical virtues. It's just, you're just going to get to more definitions. And so, like, if you could give me like one example that I can look at, we'll have to do it later because we've been going for about 2 hours, but one example where that doesn't work. Give me one example where just the definitional thing, I can't just mirror it and get a one-to-one correlation. That would be a good argument for me to really delve into and look at, that I could take a little more seriously, because all of the theist arguments I've talked to, I can just mirror one-to-one with a new definition, and I've never come into a problem with this method. And so if you could give me that example, like you said, you're going to send me a paper, I'd love to look at that. But to me, I don't find these arguments compelling, because I've always been able to mirror it. No matter how far down the rabbit hole we go of definitions, I'm always able to mirror it one-to-one, and there's never been a symmetry breaker. So
sorry. But then I'm trying to understand how your arguments are anything different from a semantic argument, because the referent is still the same. It seems to be the same, but it's just the referral term that you're using is just different. So wibbly wobbly principle, all these sort of things have the same characteristic as your entity here. What difference is there in the reference? There just seems to be a difference in the referral term. So how is that anything of substance outside of semantics?
Well, I changed the property, so it's not conscious. There's no goodness, no
Yeah.
omnipotence, or there is omnipotence. There's not omniscience. So I just usually change one or two of the properties that are assumed in the quality of the God. So if it's not conscious, not God. If it's not omnipotent or not omniscient, not God. So I just change one of those properties, and it seems like with the changed property, I can mirror everything and still get it to work one to one.
Okay. So, but then you have that with one specific criterion. And I have no problem. And that's why I'm not arguing a lot for predictive power, because predictive power is something which can be had literally by anything. Like I said to you, the ghost and the wind. In fact, and I don't think you said it will be like that, but you haven't shown it to be like that. So at the moment, at this present moment, I don't think you've shown that actually whatever entity that you put forward has better fit with the criteria. It might have equal fit when it comes to predictive power, but then if you're deciding between them when it comes to background knowledge, and we won't have time and we haven't looked at simplicity, so we can maybe leave that, but just going with background knowledge, you haven't shown it to be the case. All you've done is just saying, actually, I like the background knowledge when it's just focused on science. But what I'm trying to say to you is, how would that work within a metaphysical field? Because then that would say we cannot do metaphysics, because a lot of entities aren't studied by the natural sciences. And so, but that's not, and the problem is correspondence to actually practice in reality doesn't seem to be the case. That's how the way people operate. It seems to be the case that people operating the way I'm saying, that actually the domain of metaphysics should be determining what's in the background knowledge and not necessarily in the domain of science, which in the metaphysical picture is only a pocket of that. And so I'm trying to understand why I should take what you're saying to be the correct sort of zone for background knowledge.
Oh
And
yeah,
so,
yeah.
yeah, just with the semantic argument, it's maybe worked when it came to predictive power, but it hasn't been shown for fit with background knowledge.
Right. And so my argument is that I can do that for every single one of your criteria, and I can go down the list and show there's no symmetry breaker. And I agree it's a semantic argument because I think that's the same of your argument and most of these arguments. They're just semantic arguments. They're just definitional, which is why you can just mirror them. If it's just semantics, then you're going to necessarily be able to mirror them one to one always. And so I think that
sorry, that can't be the case when it comes to this, because when we have, and there are postulations of entities that are fundamental to explain what I'm trying to say that needs to be explained. So the non-fundamental in the grounding relation. There are entities that are postulated. Schaffer does that throughout his work, and Simmons and others, to say, actually, this seems to be what we should say are the absolutely fundamental entities. But if it's just semantics, then we should be able to change between them and the other God and what these entities are postulated when they are clearly seen to be things that are not. But where the semantics comes in is because you're just postulating an entity that actually, if it does fit with background knowledge, doesn't seem to be the case, that it's different from what's postulated by the theist in this specific case.
well,
Because what I was trying to say, what I was trying to say to you is,
it wouldn't be conscious. Like again, there's no consciousness there, so and it doesn't have omniscience. So those would be like
so you've had the predictive power, but then if we're going to take this to be a live option, you will need to show that it's a field that is a trope, and that hasn't been shown. So then why should I take your entity to be semantically the same as this specific one?
Right. So my argument here is that with the tropes, I'll be able to do the same thing I've been doing for the past 2 hours. So the past 2 hours, like we went through your arguments of the definition, the working principle, and the assumption, and then also the synchronicity thing. So yeah, you had those 4 criteria, and I demonstrated I can mirror those one to one with a non-conscious entity. And so just like I could do with those 4, I'm probably going to be able to do the same no matter how many criterion you add. That's my argument. So it's an inductive argument. So it's an inductive saying, just like I did those past ones, I can do all of them.
Okay. Yeah, I like the confidence. But I mean, if it's an inductive argument, then I'll ask yourself then, why aren't fields taken to be tropes generally then? I mean,
Because tropes aren't taken seriously in physics.
No. I'm saying in metaphysics. No, I'm saying, I'm not saying in physics. I'm saying in metaphysics where tropes are affirmed. Why outside
Oh, you broke up there for a second.
It's so easy. Oh, you're saying to me, You're saying to me, so I don't know if you heard the last bit. You're saying to me that's quite easy to do this, but I'm saying outside of yourself, why haven't fields then been taken to be tropes? If we're taking this inductively,
Because philosophy and metaphysics doesn't deal in reality, it deals in imagination, and so there isn't usually a correspondence between things in reality like fields and imaginary concepts like tropes. I don't think that that's really an enterprise in most philosophers try to undertake, and which is why philosophers and physicists don't get along. Physicists don't really care what philosophers have to say, and philosophers don't really care what physicists have to say. That's what Stephen Hawking's book was all like. Philosophy is dead because philosophers don't keep up with the physics, and the physicists don't keep up with the philosophers. So there isn't a lot of bridging between those two fields when it comes to trying to make analogize different fundamental concepts in each field, because the physicists just don't care what the philosophers think, and the philosophers just don't care what the physicists think.
but no one is saying about who cares what. It's saying have the concepts being used in one field in another field. So in physics, and then it's utilized in metaphysics. So my question would be, I don't feel you've read a lot of contemporary metaphysics then, because contemporary metaphysicians are doing a lot of that, where they utilize elements in physics and saying, actually, metaphysically, we can elucidate this a lot more by these specific concepts. So if you look at Schaffer, you look at Ted Sider, you look at Kit Fine, all these leading metaphysicians, they are doing that. So I don't understand where you're saying it's just in the imaginary realm. I think it's just a form of scientism that's been assumed, but metaphysicians don't assume your form of scientism. So I don't think it plays any part. Because at the end of the day, this argument is trying to say from metaphysical data. So you can, I mean, one way you can just say the argument you don't like it is because you don't like metaphysics. So if you get rid of metaphysics, then okay, this is not evidence. But if people like metaphysics, and a lot of people do study and look into areas of metaphysics, this is what I'm saying where this argument is going to play a part. So the audience then would be that. But yeah, so I don't see your problem. I see the problem is only grounded and rooted upon your disdain for philosophy or metaphysics,
So,
because you
sort
keep on
of.
saying, yeah, I mean, you keep on saying imaginary, 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 when actually if philosophers aren't saying they're imaginary. I don't think you have grounds to just say this is reality just because it might be empirical makes something real. I don't think just something being empirical makes it real, um, or being able to be assessed in that specific way. So I'm not getting how you've shown the argument itself to be wrong, because yeah,
Right,
yes.
right. So I think that that's partially true, and that my disdain for metaphysics comes from the fact that no one's ever demonstrated metaphysics could be useful for anything or discovering anything about reality ever. Like it's all seems to be semantics. It all seems to be definitional, which is why I can just mirror any argument as far as I can tell. I've never seen any successful use of metaphysics to accomplish anything, which is why I have disdain from it. Why I trust physics. Physics works. I get TVs and planes and stuff, and so for me, it seems from my perspective that yeah, metaphysics is just making stuff up. It's just imaginary definition making, defining things into existence. I don't see why we should ever trust anything they have to say. It's like I'm like the physicist. Like, why would anyone ever look at this and try to gain knowledge about the world other than just in a definitional way? And that's why I like exploring this conversation. I'm trying to figure out what is in your argument that gives me some grounding to actually accept this as a correspondence to reality as opposed to just definitional, because I can't find it. It just seems definitional. It seems like you've given a definition to a thing and you think this definition is good because it's a trope, and you think tropes are good because philosophers in metaphysics like tropes or something along those lines. Or it's useful for metaphysical theoretical role, plays some theoretical role, I think was the term you used. And to me, I just don't see that. I don't see any reason to trust that methodology. That does not seem like a good methodology. Science seems like a very good methodology. So by comparison, I think we should go with the science.
Yeah, but no, but one second again, if you had Schaffer in front of you, Schaffer will not be saying the science has any issue with the metaphysics that we're looking at here. The science is not saying, "Hey, we got an alternative option here in science that we can prove and we can predict, we can do all these sort of things." And metaphysicians just here, coming up with imaginary things. That's not how the dialogue's going with contemporary metaphysics. Contemporary metaphysics is saying, "Okay, science has actually given us this specific data. What's the fundamental structure of it? What's the nature of this data?" And so I think your problem as well with this issue is you're bringing in practicality of something. Just because something's practical makes it more worth and of value, not necessarily, because fundamental physics is not very practical as such in the way that we normally use practicality. But theoretical physicists will see it as being grave importance to gain knowledge about the fundamental laws and things like that. Um, but metaphysicians are just saying the same thing, that even at a deeper level, there's a certain structure to reality that we are trying to understand through metaphysical theorizing that science cannot speak about. Um, and so I don't think practicality plays any part as good reason to say one domain is better than the other. Yes, one domain can be very practical, and I high five scientists all the time. I love science. I think it's great, but it's also limited because it only looks at physical reality. But metaphysics looks at generally everything and tries to say, well, what's this fundamental structure that we have in front of us? So I would think you just have to take it up with metaphysics and say, well, there's a problem here. And you're not practical, but metaphysicians are going to say, well, what's the problem with that?
Well, I would say, how is it different from asserting Zeus? Like, so there's things in reality we can't explain, science doesn't answer. Just a god of the gaps say, well, Zeus did it, or these tropes did it.
No, but I don't think that's the case. So if you have things like composition, so how would science explain what is composition? Are things composed of parts and wholes? Are they not? Should we take some nominalist view or something like that? I mean, is science going to play a role in that type of debate?
Yeah, I think science is the only way to answer that, and everyone else is just kind of making stuff up.
So explain to me how science will explain about composition.
No idea, but it's the more reliable tool.
Then what I've got at the end of this conversation is it's just assertions. Science is going to do it. Science is our savior. It's going to do it.
Wait, well, how is that different from the lightning example?
I'm always asking, please, can you show these things? Like, show them to be the case, and don't just say, I'm just going to say science is going to do it. How would science deal with, okay, for example, again, how is science going to deal with the issue of which theory of truth is correct? How is science going to deal with that?
Well, again, it's like
coherence theory, is it correspondence theory?
I'm not seeing how that's different from the lightning case. So there's a phenomenon we can't explain. We don't know how to do it. We don't. So say we lived 2,000-3,000 years ago. We see lightning. We have no idea what it is. And you ask me, well, how is science going to explain that? I'm like, I have no idea. But that still seems like a better explanation to go with the science, which has worked to this point, than to make stuff up like Zeus, because the process of that methodology of making up hypothetical explanations has never worked, but science does.
Yeah, but sorry, Tom, I do have to go in a few minutes, but just about this point, I think again your analogy doesn't fit because the lightning case, the Zeus case, is speaking about physical phenomena. So obviously, science, which is the study of the natural world, the physical phenomena that we have in front of us, is going to be able to explain that. But what I'm speaking to you about is something that is metaphysical, is beyond the physical phenomena. So things like truth. So I ask you again, please can you tell me how the coherence theory of truth, correspondence theory of truth, or another theory of truth is going to be explained by the natural sciences?
I don't know, but it's the exact same thing as people who thought lightning was beyond the physical realm and couldn't be explained. It was later, but I still think that's a better choice.
I mean, it's quite clear.
They thought it was, and just like you think truth is, but I don't think it will be.
Oh, so truth is a physical phenomenon.
Everything is physical. Yes.
So truth is physical.
Yeah, truth, property of sentences, and whether or not they correspond to reality, it's all physical facts in the brain.
Okay. Yeah, but things. Okay, I mean, I think you've meshed up a lot of issues. Understanding the concepts that play a part, propositional statements, when it comes to truth, might exist in the mind, but the concept of truth itself, I just don't understand how that follows. So I think we might just be arguing into a rabbit hole here.
Yeah, thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it. Do you want to give a shout out where people can find your stuff, read your works?
Yeah. So a lot of my stuff is, I mean, everything's uploaded on academia. So if you just type in my name, Joshua Sijuwade, hope you can see how to spell it in the description. But yeah, type that into academia. You'll find all my papers, specifically the two papers we were discussing today. It's grounding in the existence of God and fundamentality in the existence of God. So hopefully people can read it. And yeah, I'm always open to objections. And yeah, Tom, I will send you that paper and we can see if it fits, as you said.
Yeah, please highlight whichever part you think would be the hardest that I can focus on.
I'll just put it's just a certain section that runs through tropes and things like that. I'll just put the number down and yeah, you can have a look at it.
Awesome. Thanks again. Really appreciate you coming on. I'd love to chat with you again sometime.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. And thank you for the dialogue. I really, really enjoyed it. And yeah, have a great day.
Awesome. You can just close the screen. I'm going to start the after show and have a nice day.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. All right, guys, after show time, join the Discord. Thank you guys for the super chats. Was absorbed in the conversation, so I was not paying attention to the super chats, but I appreciate them, as always. After show. http://discord.io/TJump. CV, enter. The shout of trope. Yes, that is beautiful. I love it. Who likes to chat, join the Discord after show at everyone after show time. TJump, what's the basic rundown on trope theory? I'm not sure how to answer that. Tropes, as he defined them, are abstract entities that are constitute their whole being or something like that. I can hear you through my speakers for some reason. Settings. How's it going?
Good. It was an interesting discussion.
Yep. Because he posted a new argument paper and was on Capturing Christianity.
Yeah. But yeah, I think you demolished him. The arbitrary argument is just like crushing. Like you can't defeat it. But he can't see it because it's just like a post hoc rationalization of religion.
Tirar says, drink a shot every time he says trope and we all die of alcohol poisoning.
Oh, man.
Trope count over 9,000. Have a trope and a smile.
Yeah, I mean, I looked up the definition of trope too. And it's like basically your imagination.
Well, that's just like that's different from the philosophical definition, because philosophical definition is more specific on like a specific usage of how it relates to metaphysical theories. It's not the same as just the dictionary definition.
Right. Like it's been used so many times that it must be relating to some real thing.
I don't think it's about used. That's not exactly what it means. So trope is just a word that they use, a noun, to represent something that explains some metaphysical phenomenon. So they could just use the word potato or whatever. It's just the word trope. It doesn't relate to the dictionary definition at all. TJump, why are you hateful of metaphysics? Also, if you learn metaphysics, are you now a Muslim? What? No. Oh, yes. I remember that. That's the response to the previous debate. Yeah, I'm hateful of metaphysics because it's never done anything. It's just philosophers making stuff up, as far as I can tell. I like science. He got a PhD at Trope University. He has a legit PhD. He's a legit doctor. Legit PhD. I think it's like Oxford, Stanford, a big one.
In theology?
Philosophy. He's a philosopher.
Philosophy. I felt like he was avoiding talking about God as much as possible.
I don't think so. Like, I didn't bring it up because I was focused more on the structure of his argument. So I wasn't specifically going into God. If I invite him on next time, I would like to talk about simplicity and the properties of God, and those seem arbitrary as well. That would be another one.
Where are people writing these questions?
What questions? In my YouTube chat?
Sounds like you're... Oh, are you on YouTube right now?
Yes, I'm a YouTube streamer. That's what I do.
Interesting. Does the server owner know that you're like streaming in here?
Yes, because it's my server.
That's why it says after show. We only come in here after the show.
That's not true. We come in here for all kinds of no reasons.
Fine.
You can see Simon sleeping in here and snoring all the time.
I was speaking to Beowulf last night, and I realized you I really enjoyed listening to one of your shows there with Dark Dawkins, and how you replied to him with like reality is the answer to everything.
Yes.
Or something along those lines.
Yes, that's pretty funny.
I was talking to Beowulf because it feels like I'm in like a simulation, and everything around me is just like being fed into my head.
That must be a strange feeling.
It is pretty weird because I always feel like I'm trying to unplug from inside my body and like escape out of this reality. Not like in a psychotic way, but like in a physical manifestation. So I guess if someone has those feelings, like myself, would morals and stuff really matter?
Yes. I mean, morals would still matter even if you're in a computer.
But if you're in a game, or it's all just, you know, like a reality given to you, or presented to you.
Well, do you...
Like, I can't verify that it's real or not.
Well, do you think there are other minds? Like, are there other people? Because if there are, then morality matters even if you can't verify it.
Yeah, but I think the consequences of actions is irrelevant.
If there are no other people, but if there are other people, it would still matter. Like, even if we're in the Matrix and you can feel pain and I torture you, it's still immoral, even if it's just in the Matrix.
Well, if pain's just like a sensory thing,
yes,
does it really, like, I don't know if it really matters even if I felt pain.
Yes.
It would be immoral if someone tortured me.
Yes. So, like, morality, by my definition, is an involuntary imposition of will. So if you're in the Matrix and you don't want to feel pain and I torture you, it's immoral for me to do so.
It's an interesting concept. Morality, I mean.
Very.
Is I don't really like.
For example, psychological torture.
Well, I mean, I love that shit. That's great. That's pretty cool. Like, how you can psychologically
torture people
without using physical means. Yeah. I'm someone who lacks a lot of more like higher functioning empathy and stuff. So.
I can relate. I have high function autism, so I definitely have the same thing.
I could be autistic. I could also just be a psychopath. I'm not sure, because I think at one point I might have felt emotions like normal people do, and it could be a PTSD response or something. So I'm open to that as being an explanation for why I have this.
Can you feel empathy while watching movies and stuff of like characters you like? Did you get into movies and like?
Sometimes, but it's usually reactive to it's limited to anger and revenge. It's very rarely, well, I don't ever really feel sad or empathetic.
You don't cry.
Yeah, have you ever watched like any really good movies that you like that you got like attached to the characters, were sad when they died in the movie or whatever?
Oh no, because they don't exist.
Yeah, so it definitely sounds more like autism than psychopathy.
Well, it's interesting because like even people that I can see in front of me that exist, I wouldn't really like if police didn't come and like put me in chains or whatever and put me inside a cell, I would be fine like just slitting their throat as they are and just watch them bleed out. And just like to see what it's like. I'm interesting to see what kind of if I would feel anything as a test.
Yeah, that seems more like autism than psychopathy. Autism is more curious in that sense. Psychopathy is more focused on self-profit.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't harm people now.
And if it's just curiosity, you can find videos of that.
Yeah, but I don't. It's weird you say that because I actually don't care to watch videos of people doing it to other people. Not like I don't like watching those beheading videos. If that's what you mean.
More or less.
Yeah, I don't really care to watch people chopping people's heads off. I just prefer to do it quick because it's kind of lame. It's
So
inefficient
any
and
other
ineffective.
topics we can talk about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's cool. I just
Instead of
curious what your
Dexter.
thoughts on that one. Yeah, I'm very planned out. Like I haven't really committed any crimes, and I'd like to, but I have to make sure that I can get away with them first
Still not sure what
before
a
I
trope
act on
is.
it. A trope, it's an STD.
No,
A trope is a crab thing that crawls at the bottom of the ocean.
no. Trope in philosophy is mostly just an idea that is meant to describe some kind of abstract relation in the universe. Causation,
Okay.
grounding, space-time.
Have you ever
Abstract
spoken to
concept that
Shuv
describes
about
shit in
free
the
will?
universe.
Have
An
you spoken to
undefined.
Shuv about free will, mate?
What?
Have you covered the free will debate?
Yes, many times.
What's your position on that?
Free will is logically impossible. All of your actions are either determined by reasons, and so they're not free, or they're done for literally no reason, and they're random, and they're not free. And so it's only a combination of those two things, and so you're not free.
So you're saying I can't willingly choose anything?
Not in the free will sense. There's a compatibilist sense, but not in the free will sense.
Then why do people have like morals for consequences and stuff? Like why should someone suffer for something they did if they have no real control over it?
Prevention, not punishment. So they're not deserving of punishment. You have crimes and stuff, or jail time for prevention. To prevent it from occurring in the future. And because people are determined by previous data, if you know that someone is thrown in jail for stealing stuff, it makes most people less likely to steal stuff. So it's prevention.
You can also create like a veil of ignorance. So you could say like we would want murder to not exist in this society because if I was some random person and I got murdered, I would be like I would have a problem with that, right? So say like okay,
Wait, you'd
like,
have a problem with being murdered?
Typically, people would have a problem with being murdered.
typically, let's say
Why do
I
people-
survive my murder, then I'll be angry, right?
Why would you be angry? Because you didn't get murdered, and the whole thing was you would get upset about being murdered.
Well, that's silly. Anger is a chemical reaction in the brain, so anything that occurs that is shocking or unpleasant or a risk causes you to be angry. But I'd say that morality is any involuntary imposition of will.
That from a meta perspective, why would you be upset about being murdered? Because if you're dead, you can't be upset about it, and you can't be upset beforehand either because they're not murdered yet. It would be illogical to be upset about something that would end your thought process.
Sounds like you agree
because your thought process isn't continuing. You would like your thought process to continue, and it ended prematurely, and so that is not a desirable state. Therefore, you are angry now if that would potentially be thought of as occurring in the future. But I think
you see where I don't understand that because it just seems irrelevant to be upset at all in the future or now about something that
you're upset now because you don't get to continue in the future. So it makes perfect sense. It's like saying,
well, I'm not. That's why I don't understand why people do get upset.
It's
why
like
would you be upset dying if you're not dead?
Say I can play video games. Say there's a really awesome video game coming out in 6 months, and then someone breaks my hands. I'm going to be very upset because I can't play the video game. So if there's more things in life you're looking forward to that you get to enjoy being alive, and someone prematurely ends that to prevent you from being able to enjoy the things in the future, that would upset you now to think about, wouldn't it? Like throwing you in prison. If someone throws you in prison and kills you, it's the same thing. They are preventing you from being able to do the things you enjoy.
So you're autistic, you said you're autistic, and you have similar feelings as I do, or non-feelings?
I have high functioning autism. I have non-empathetic feelings. I don't relate to people. Can't talk standard like.
Would you be okay with committing cold-blooded murder?
Would I be okay with it? Like emotionally, probably, but
committing. Yeah, with no. Would you have? Do you think you would have
lacking empathy, sort of? But I know it's immoral because I have a model of morality, and I adhere to that model of morality regardless of my feelings. So I would not kill someone because I know it's objectively immoral, regardless of my feelings.
Let's say I do have autism, and this is the cause of these like sociopathic like thoughts, or like I shouldn't say. It's more of a construct, really, like no one's really a psychopath, but it's just basically a mental construct. and certain characteristics that might
It
come
is the
from
lack of
person.
empathy. So it's literally just the empathy part of your brain is not working. So yes, it is a real physical thing. What was your question?
It's interesting you say that because yeah. So like I've reviewed a lot of moral constructs, and like what you just said, like you can understand moral reasons for doing or not doing things,
Yes.
but willfully not caring. What is that like? Can you choose to follow morals only until a certain point, and then not have any repercussions on yourself?
I don't
Or your
understand the
psyche?
question. So I emotionally
Okay,
am not, I'm affected by doing immoral things. I can do immoral things and not feel guilt, but because I know they're wrong, I
Right.
don't do them. So it's like playing chess. I know the rules of chess, and so I can move the bishop diagonally instead of moving it like a rook or whatever. So I can follow the rules of chess because I know what the rules are, and I can do that independent of any feelings I have.
So when you say you know that something is wrong and you don't do it, why don't you do it? Because it's wrong. Like
Because it's wrong.
What's to stop you from doing? Yeah, but like, so what? Like, why don't you do it anyway?
I value the idea of rightness, and I want to make a world of more rightness.
The reason I don't do anything is because of consequence.
Right? And so I don't do anything
So
because
the
I
only thing
value
stopping
rightness.
me from, but it only that the mental block philosophically is only going to last until the consequence no longer becomes suitable or maximize the like deterrent from doing it.
Do you
So,
play any video games?
No,
Like chess, sports, anything?
no, I have no hobbies.
No
I
hobby.
work
That's
and
what do you do for work?
work.
What do you do for work? Generally,
Right now I do like moving or laboring construction.
laboring construction. Are there rules in laboring construction?
Like what are we talking? Like morals or like
No,
rules
like
to
like
follow? I don't know.
don't put an electrical voltage next to the water heater.
OSHA rules, right?
I guess I don't. I just pick things up and move them because I'm strong.
Yeah, you don't just move them anywhere. Like
Okay.
you don't just. There's a specific place you're supposed to move them, and specific places you're not supposed to move them.
Yeah, there's instructions and procedures.
Yeah, that's it. That's
So what about
morality.
it?
If you can value your job, you do the rules. And so if you value, I value the world, so I think the rules of the world should be the moral rules. Just like you value your job, you do the job rules.
Well, I don't quite understand that like ideology. I understand the principle of it.
Well, it's like if you want to build a house, you like
I don't
put.
understand the application.
Wait, so if you want to build a house, you like build bricks in a specific order to like block the wind, right? You do a methodology to achieve a goal.
Right.
So I have a goal of my view is objective morality is a world where it's impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing. That is the house I would like to build. And so I like to place bricks in that house by following the moral principle because I'm trying to build that house. That is the goal.
Okay. And you don't find it limiting?
I don't know what that means. Like all goals are limiting because
Like,
you're directed towards one thing and not other things.
No, but it limits your progress by being slowed down by these like inferior reasons to not do things.
No, like mostly morality helps you to make more progress. So people who are seen as moral are given more shit. So it's the opposite. Like if you want, like even though I don't feel empathy or stuff, I still have learned to demonstrate empathy because it's more successful as a social metric to make progress in the world.
I agree. Like if you're in person, being uncharismatic and having no inflection, like when I talk online, wouldn't serve me benefit. But I can be charismatic and somewhat manipulative if I wanted to.
Yes, well, manipulative has the opposite effect. So actually, you'd be more successful if you were not manipulative. Any other questions?
Sorry, I was just letting it run.
Was anyone else shocked that Sijuwade couldn't conceive of entities which are omnipotent yet not omniscient? Now, that's an interesting one because that's a new thing I've come across in a few theists where they say that can can there logically possible be, is it logically possible to have an omnipotent thing that isn't also omniscient and omnibenevolent, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, many theists think it, are arguing that it's not, and it's a very strange concept.
You know why? I think it's theory of mind.
It's because they want their God to exist, and so they're defining their God into existence.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, what up, Tom?
Hey, Mr. Boss, am I autistic? Yes, I have. I was diagnosed with high functioning autism, Asperger's. Yes. What was your question? Guy who said just talking.
I only got yeah,
Converse.
Tom.
Hey,
I
how's
only
it
got a
going?
minute because I'm at work, but yeah.
Yep.
What's up, man? Yeah. So what do you so about the tropes thing, right?
Yep.
Like, I don't. So like my super chat. What do you think about? Okay, so take it. You use intuition in your moral argument, for example, right?
Well,
And
intuition
then
is
you
the
say
phenomenon.
somebody
Yeah.
would say like, "Well, what is an intuition? Is it just the result of some physical force, right? Intuition is a right. It's the phenomenon. It's the manifestation of this trope, right? I think that's what he's getting at. Is that when he said that goodness is diffusive of itself, this is like an old principle, and what he's basically saying is that when you look at goodness in the world, say, like a good person, right? They don't say, burning down buildings or something,
Yeah.
right? Because
Good people do good things.
to be
Yes.
diffusive, meaning like good people may do good things, or like your intuition, for example, right? Lead. Yeah. So that's basically what he was saying with the trope, with the principle that he's using for this trope.
Right. I understood
Is
that
that
part.
intuition as the trope?
Did he? I think he disconnected.
No, looks like he's still in here.
Oh, Converse, you're breaking up really bad. We can't understand you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just saying that you can just use it as the same as your moral argument. It's pretty much the same. It's like intuition is your trope, and then the your this as a part of your moral argument, right?
For goodness, but I don't think for tropes you could do that. I don't. Tropes themselves don't quite work that way, but for goodness you could argue that. Like I said, I was a moral realist, so you could argue that morality was a something in the universe, sure, but that wouldn't follow that it was in the God thingy or in the.
Oh no, I'm just saying this. Yeah, I get that. I'm just saying that same way that you argue for morality from intuition based on manifestations in the world. That's the same way you could argue for what he's kind of making, I believe, in this argument. Is he saying that like goodness is diffusive of itself? We seem to observe that.
I'm not. I don't think that makes sense. I don't think goodness being diffusive of itself makes any sense. Evil is diffusive of itself, so that would work equally as well for evil. Or light is diffusive of itself. Like I don't think that makes any difference. It just means things that exist interact with other things that it interacts with. Like yes, energy transfers. Yes, it does.
Yeah, and that's just the premise in his argument, right? And so, yeah, you could just say the same thing is that with your greatest of all possible worlds, with morality, right? And then you say like, well, why would you posit, moral progress? And you just go, well, because of moral, I have moral intuition. So moral progress can be your trope, and then moral intuition can be your principle. Like how he's using his argument, the trope, and then the principle to get to where you're going. You don't see there could be a parallel there with your argument?
For what? For goodness? For goodness, there's definitely a parallel, but
okay. But then you couldn't argue that it's because this is metaphysical, right? This isn't. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can say that we can, show through physics some
But
moral
yeah,
progress.
but I
or-
grant that there is no evidence of objective morality. It's just a hypothesis. So I'm saying it doesn't, it would not fit into our background knowledge. It would not fit into the background knowledge criterion because there's no empirical evidence of it.
Okay, so you would grant that your moral argument isn't
Proven? Yes. If it had
no,
been
that it's not a
proven,
good argument.
well, it's a good hypothesis, but it's not good as a thing if I claimed it already had like supporting evidence for it. So it's
Gotcha.
it's a hypothesis. It's just a hypothesis.
Yeah, I think that's what he says in his papers. He says, here's my criterion.
Well, no,
or
he
my
said it was a
criteria.
working
What is-
theory. So that's the part where we got into the conversation about like which is the best theory, and that's the part where we had a disagreement. So
Yeah.
it's the working theory definition where he says that one is an objectively like better definition, a better explanation. And I think to have a better explanation, you need the novel testable predictions. Otherwise, there's just a bunch of hypotheses.
Well, with the novel testable predictions, be something like good diffusing itself. Is that you mean of the principle?
No, that would be a post hoc observation. So that's something we observe and then define. So it would have to be
Okay.
something new we didn't know about yet.
Okay, so is your moral argument post hoc?
The moral intuition and moral progress is because those are things we observe, but then I make predictions about what's going to happen in the future. That part isn't.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Is that it just seems like there's a very close parallel to your argument you use for morality. And
Yeah,
that's why I was saying like it might be a good.
well, yeah, there's a
way
lot
to
of
approach.
parallels between my argument for morality and God. The difference is that I claim mine's just a hypothesis that doesn't have sufficient supporting
Okay.
evidence, whereas theists claim they do. So that would be the difference, is that mine's just a hypothesis, whereas theists claim it's justified sufficiently.
Yeah, well, I think that's what he argued in the paper is that here's the criteria. This trope meets it better than any criteria. You give another trope that is posited, and can it meet the criteria? And people have been trying to do that. And but he did clarify in his debate when he was on Steve McCrae's channel that he said just get rid of the word God. I'm talking about a trope, something that is universally recognized throughout, not just in theist circles, for example. And so I don't know if that might help your next conversation or not. But,
Sort of, because that's what we were getting towards is like, are tropes reliable background knowledge? That was kind of a lot of where we led to at the end of the conversation. So that would probably be the next step.
okay, cool. Yeah, so that might actually to clarify. But anyway, I got to get back to work. Good talking to you.
Yep, good seeing you. Talk to you later. Anybody else got any questions?
I had a question about, so I might be getting it wrong, but I think you say something about like free will in the sense that it can't exist because things either happen for reasons or not reasons, right?
Yes.
So I don't really see like, it seems like when we're talking about free will, that like I think that both people that think that we do have free will to some extent and people that are completely like deterministic or have a deterministic view of the universe would say that they agree with the statement that like if the universe is deterministic, you would, given all of the relevant information, you would be able to like accurately predict what an agent will do like 100% of the time. And then in a non-deterministic universe, that just wouldn't be the case. Like you might be able to predict accurately just because you got lucky, but realistically you would be wrong sometimes because there's going to be some like unaccounted for component there that is going to be free will. And it sort of seems like when you're just saying that something happens for not reasons, the same thing that you're trying to say is kind of like the same thing that someone that would say that we have free will is talking about anyway, if that makes sense.
So my argument doesn't have to do with whether or not we can predict actions of people. My argument is that any action that any person does, any decision anyone makes, there's only two possibilities. Either they made that decision because there were pre-existing reasons, like their brain chemistry prioritized option A over option B because more electrical neurons fired in that direction or something, or because of, even if there's like a spiritual thing, it doesn't make a difference. There's still going to be some reason determining why it picked A over B. Or it didn't, there was zero reasons. It was exactly 50-50. It was just a random guess, a random choice that happened. Those are the only two options. So either something causes you to choose A, it's a reason done for a reason, or there's literally no reason. So there's 50-50 split, no, just a random choice between one or the other. Either way, it's not a choice. It's either determined by not you, or it's random by not you. There's no way for the choice thing to have a part. It's going to be one or the other of determined by things that are not you, or random, which means it was not you.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that it seems like, to me at least, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it seems like when you're saying that, you know, a certain like path is taken for not reasons, that's kind of not really making a substantive distinction between like, or like, I guess I don't really know what it means to say that things are random for not, you know, like, what do you mean when you say random and like external to the person?
Random meaning it's completely undetermined by anything. Literally random. Just happens for no reason at all.
Okay, because to me it seems like
Go ahead.
if a decision, like if you have two like identical universes or something with all of the same people and events in them, up until like a point at which one person has to choose between like, I don't know, eating an apple or eating a cookie, right? What I was getting at with the whole like being able to predict people's choices and things like that is that, you know, it seems like if both were deterministic, both of these identical people would choose the apple or something, whatever it is, they would choose the same thing. But if we had some sort of free will, it's possible that it would just randomly, you know, at least like it would appear to be random, I guess, but that in one universe, one would choose the apple, and then in the other universe, the identical person would choose the cookie or something.
Well, there's a difference between the epistemology, what it appears like, and the ontology, what it actually is. So we can forget about the epistemology. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter what we know. You can tell me what it actually is like. You can just say, okay, free will is a real thing. Let's just assume it's a real thing. How can free will possibly do anything that isn't either determined by prior reasons, and so it's not free, or there are zero prior reasons, none whatsoever, in which case it's random.
Are you just saying that because, you know, even in what like someone might say is a decision they make out of like free will or something, that there's still going to be some like precursor of, you know, neurochemical activity or something like that that's going to determine it, like their
Yes.
choice?
That
Okay.
is one of the options. The only other option is that there's literally nothing determining it. And so it's just like a roll of a dice, completely random. There's nothing causing it to happen. Just 100% random event. And neither of those are free. Either you're determined by prior conditions, which isn't free. You're not free to choose otherwise. It's literally something else that's forcing you to choose. Or it's completely random, which you have no control over, and it's again not free. So neither of those are free.
All right, I think I get you now. Thanks.
Yep. So many words. Who posted a paragraph, Tenma? Can you make it like a sentence?
I can make my bot read it for you if you want.
Yes, the reason I like burgers is because it makes me feel good, even though it's immoral. Yes, the moral system does not compel me to not eat meat, even though it's moral, and I understand it's moral to not eat meat. Personally, yes, there's definitely an element of personal preference where my desires overtake my moral framework. Yes, so my desire to achieve the morally perfect world guides some of my actions. Like, I'm not going to kill somebody, but it doesn't guide all of my actions. Like eating meat, I'm still going to eat meat. So yes, my moral system, I have a motivation to want to achieve my moral world, but that motivation is less than my motivation to eat cheeseburgers and pizza. All right.
Two of the best food groups ever.
Efont, how do scientists like Sean Carroll believe in compatibilism in terms of free will? Compatibilism is just a kind of determinism. So it's just determinism. It's just saying your brain acting determined by its previous causes is literally they're just calling it free will. TJump, do you plan your life like the next 5 years? Sort of. I have plans that I like to accomplish. I don't know how long it takes to accomplish them. I don't have them planned for like X number of years. I accomplish them as soon as I can accomplish them. So I have my future plans, which I hope to accomplish in the next 5 years. I don't know if I will though. So in a way, yes, and in a way, no. TJump, do you think Sijuwade was taking into account anything about the universe in his theory? It feels very armchair philosopher where he doesn't even need to be aware of the universe, just think of God's concepts via tropes. I don't think so. I think that the philosophers who use tropes probably use the universe, use things in the universe, and then come up with tropes as an idea to explain causation in the universe. So yes, it's very armchair philosophy, but I think they're using physics and then trying to explain physics with tropes. I don't think that's a good methodology.
TJump.
Yep.
Here's one for you. Would you ever want to try a Team Skeptic style debate?
I think I've been on Flat Earth shows. Like, what is a Team Skeptic style debate?
Basically, you just go at them full out, like Team Skeptic does.
Like I do in some of my debates. I don't understand the difference.
But yeah, it's a Flat Earth debate is what I'm talking about.
I've done many Flat Earth debates. Yes, I do Flat Earth debates.
Might be able to get physicists to argue with you.
Sure. When Sijuwade said metaphysical data, what do you think he meant? Just explaining the stuff that we see, essentially. Coming up with concepts that explain the data is essentially, I think, what metaphysical data is supposed to be. Rayra says, I prefer the TJump style. I think I prefer my style too. I don't really know what Team Skeptic style is, but I like my style. Anybody else got any questions, comments, stuff? TJump, am I cool? I'm actually kind of warm right now. It's kind of hot. How do you spell loobly lobbly? I said, oh, wobbly wobbly. It was the W. It's got a W in it. The woobly wobbly. Woo, like Wu-Tang Clan. Woobly wobbly principle. Thank you for the super chat, Marty Mad Scientist. If science is right, we have a quickly growing chance at immortality. Do you think theism will survive? How do you replace it for stupid people? How do we replace it for stupid people? Once we gain technological immorality, religion will die off very quickly. Very, very quickly will die off. It's essentially around as a coping mechanism with death and a motivation mechanism. And as soon as we replace morality and a fear of death, then yeah, religion's going to be gone within pretty quickly.
Would you want to live 300 years?
Yes, I would like to live forever until I decide to not care.
I don't know about forever. It's a long time, but wouldn't mind getting a few hundred years. Or at least until civilization collapses, I can say to myself, I told you so.
Can you even imagine if we lived to like 930? Like we had another 1,000 years of like technology and stuff.
That'd be nice.
Problem is, like, even if we had long lives, like I think our chronic disease will kill us by our like mid 50s, 60s. So it's like you need to like
Our current life expectancy is 80.
Yeah, I know, but like a lot of chronic diseases are killing us off much younger. It's like the stat is falling over like the last few years.
Lucor, thank you for the super chat. Do you think that setting sentience as a threshold to decide whether or not to eat something is arbitrary or even reasonable? I don't think it's arbitrary. I do think it's reasonable. I don't. I think that you could definitely say if it's sentient and conscious, you shouldn't eat it or kill it because it's morally significant. I think that's fine. If you believe in objective morality, it makes perfect sense. Or even if you don't and you believe in subjective morality, it still makes perfect sense. TJump, would someone else preventing you from eating meat be a moral action or a justified immoral action? It'd be both. So it would be a moral action to protect the animal. Is it morally protecting the animal? And it would be a justified immoral action to prevent me from eating meat because it's. I guess it would be immoral. I don't know if it'd be justified because it depends on if we have the ability to have enough food to feed everybody without that. I don't know if it's justified or not. It's definitely immoral. TJump, would you marry a rich woman if she was extremely attractive and about 20? Lin Yin Chin, sentiments you hold on Terence McKenna and his life philosophy conveyed through the 90s in public speeches? I have no opinion. I don't know who that is for the most part. Ethnobotanist. I don't know what this guy's work is, so I have no opinion. Jeff, I don't understand what the difference is between explanatory power and predictive power in Josh's paradigm. I don't know if there would be just by using the basic definitions right there. Because I don't think he brought those up as separate points. I think explanatory power is the ability to create. So like I can imagine a unicorn, so I have the explanatory power to explain the existence of an imaginary unicorn. Predictive power doesn't necessarily mean that there's power there. Like if a rock falls and hits another rock, it doesn't explain why the rocks exist. So the explanatory power is like what causes the existence of the thing, whereas the predictive power is just predicting interactions between the things. I think would be the explanation. Mr. Boss, TJump, do episode about autism and how to deal with it. I don't really know how to do that because I've never really thought much about my autism. For me, it's just I know what I need to be happy, and I try to get the thing I need to be happy. I don't really, I don't really think about autism as a thing that I need to like learn how to deal with. It was more just figuring out what my special interest was, the thing I valued, and how to get that thing, and then I'm happy. Roger Wenzel, thank you for the super chat. Keep up the good work and thinking. Will do. Jojo Freelancer, what kind of autism does TJump have? I have high functioning autism. What are all your mental health diagnoses? I was diagnosed with dyslexia, dysgraphia, major depression, and high function autism. TJump is obviously high. I do not smoke or drink. I don't do any drugs because they don't make me feel good. Thank you for the super chat, Frank. Appreciate it as always. Brian Harper. TJump is not as obviously high, and then space, enter, next thing functioning. Mr. Boss, do you like school? No. I hated school. School was miserable.
Excuse me, TJump. If they think you're high, what am I?
Hopped up out of your mind.
Onward.
Tinma, was your autism diagnosed? Yes, it was diagnosed by one of the leading autism experts at the time, Mark something. I forgot his name. Yes, I was diagnosed by an actual doctor, and I got covered on my parents' insurance till I was 26, or no, I was covered till like last year. So yeah, I was actually diagnosed and got medical coverage for it. TJump, who would win in a fight, you or James Coons? It would depend. If it was an intellectual fight, I would win. If it was an actual physical fight, James would probably win, unfortunately.
Let's hope it's an IQ fight.
James used to be like a Division I high school football player who was almost drafted into the NFL. He is jacked as shit. Neat Books, do you still lift? Nope. I kind of, as soon as I got in my happiness and no longer solved my depression, I stopped caring and stopped exercising, and I've gained like 40 pounds. I'm like at 240 right now. I'm super fat. But you can box. I used to do boxing at the University of Minnesota boxing club. But I'm fat and out of shape, so if I like throw a punch, I'm gonna like throw my shoulder out. Yes, James is jacked. Looks like we gotta make TJump depressed again. Gains greater than happiness. Is the righteous gemstones amusing you? What is the righteous gemstones? Thank you for the super chat, Lucor.
No, what you do to get relaxed is just dig the Kraken out of the liquor cabinet and sit back with it.
I don't drink. It's disgusting. Alcohol is disgusting. What is righteous gemstones? Lucor, follow-up question. When I asked if they would eat an animal that was hypothetically made non-sentient, most vegans replied, not a chance in hell. Is that hypothetical? No, there's synthetic meats, and vegans are usually okay with synthetic meats. But I mean, if you can create like a brain and everything, you could probably assume it's physical. So like you'd have to create just the muscles, which is what synthetic meats are. TJump, can you beat infrared? Infrared is a short, little, puny guy. He's like 5'4". He weighs a third of what I do. I would almost definitely beat him in a fight. Also, he can't box. Like he turned down a boxing match with Dylan Burns, and Dylan Burns has like he did one fight once. So the fact that he was I'd probably beat him. TJump, I'm vegan and I wouldn't have a problem with it if it tastes good and is healthy. I imagine he's talking about artificial meats. So we have a vegan in the Discord and he says he would not have a problem with it. Do I smoke weed? No, I do not smoke. I have smoked it. I don't like it. It does not make me feel good. It makes me feel not good. You salty Dodger Nobu, so what's your vice? Ryan Lyon is correct. It is hot blondes. Would you debate Ali Dawa? Sure. I'd debate anybody. You got to get him on the show. Is there an after show text chat? Main stage chatter. Do I have a girlfriend? Sort of. I have like a sugar baby more than a girlfriend. Yeah, I'd like to debate Muhammad Hijab also. After show chat. Yoink. Show chat. Yoink. Would I debate a prostate prophet? Sure. Wait, isn't he an atheist?
He is.
What would I debate him on?
I've got no clue. He's at least a little fun though, because he debates like the worst Muslims I've ever seen. Like his latest one was with a weird guy, like ate grapes. What's his name?
Have you seen my last two debates with Muslims?
I mean, the last two, I don't. I mean, there was that one guy recently that was pretty bad, but this is like a podcast journey people bad, where like
like the last two guys I debated, like one of them, the second one wasn't awful, but the first one was like, the beauty of the Quran is the evidence of the truth. I'm like, so stupid. They're so bad. I think it was the same guy Muslim apology or apostate prophet debated. It might have been. Christian Prince would be a debate candidate. I don't know who that is. Christian Prince. Christian Paste. Christian Prince. Oh, he's a Muslim guy? Christian Prince YouTube. Can you send me a link to his YouTube channel so I can like find it? Send him an invite. That one might be at favorites bar. Do you feel that Muslim debaters are 30 years behind in apologetics? I feel they're more than like 300 years behind in apologetics. What do you think about starting college in 30 plus? If you have the money, I think college is a gigantic waste of money, but I think if I had the money, I'd definitely do it for the parties mostly, not because I want an education. Mufti Abu Laith. Mufti Abu Laith. Like, if you guys can get these people on the show, like send them an email, see if they'll come on the show, because I don't know how I'm going to get them on the show, especially Muslims like never come on, almost rarely. Yeah, Brian, I can relate to that extreme social anxiety, specific jobs, and don't go out much. I kind of feel the same way. Is 35 considered old? I guess so. I don't know. Thanks, Jojo. You send it in the probably, yeah, private chat. We'll check it out later. I have Kennedy. I've emailed Matt Powell multiple times. He never emails back. Isn't James going to college right now? Yes, James is going for his PhD in like business psych at Colorado. He's also like an associate professor or something there. TJump ever played Star Citizen? Nope. Star Citizen is on my list of GameFly games, so I'll get to it eventually. I'm currently playing Far Cry 6. Far Cry 6 is a pretty fun game. It's not as good as Far Cry 4. Far Cry 4 was amazing. Far Cry 3 was pretty amazing. Far Cry 5 sucked balls. Salty Dodger, any plans to come to the UK and do some live debates? If someone pays for the trip, I will go. But I cannot afford to pay for the trip. Hello, people from, is that Twitch? Dying Light is also on the list. Dying Light is also on my GameFly list, so I'll get that eventually. Efont, what is your favorite video game ever? It is definitely Ninja Gaiden 2. Ninja Gaiden 2 is the greatest game ever, objectively, in the world.
You sure that can't be subjectively?
Nope, it is a fact of the universe. God himself could not change it. Logical law of the universe.
Not my favorite game.
It's because you're silly. You're just wrong.
No, it's just I have a
Factually wrong. Shinmu. That game is also on my list. I have like 50 games on my list. Upcoming GameStop, Gamefly games. What about Sifu? Sifu game. Sifu game. Oh, that's the new one. That one. Is that one on PlayStation 4? Yes, it is. So I'll probably get that one eventually. Gamefly. Go to Gamefly. Arg. I want to go Sifu. Sifu PS4 Vengeance Edition. Rinse. Added to queue. So I added that one to my queue. Oh, there's a new Horizon Forbidden West coming, but I need to apparently add that to my get a PS5. Oh no, it's got a PS4. It's got a PS4 option, so I don't need a PS5. I don't need a PS5. All right, that's good. Go to the bottom. Time is it? It's 1:20. I have another debate at 3, I think.
Ooh, what's the topic at 3?
The guy I had on earlier, Charles, the young Earth creationist guy, the young Earth creationist secular Jew guy. My good friend William Lane Craig, or Capturing Christianity or Inspiring Philosophy. I like these guys. I've debated Inspiring Philosophy before, but I haven't heard back from him since then. I've been on Capturing Christianity, but haven't heard back from him since then. Have not gotten William Lane Craig yet.
Cameron nearly makes me sad.
What?
Like before, I used to at least think he had some stuff going on, but lately his arguments have just been worse and worse.
Oh, Cameron? Yeah. TJump, what would you think about Sam Harris? I think Sam Harris is really interesting in a lot of ways. Definitely like to have him on my show because I'd get a lot more views for sure. Yeah, William Lane Craig, stop ducking TJump. That's right. He's afraid of debating me. He's a fraidy cat. So what we need to do as a community, get TJump to buy a tabletop simulator. I don't know what that means. Tabletop simulator.
So, Tabletop Simulator is a game that allows you to play almost any board game. You can like find people who have made these in this engine, and then you can just play. And most of them are for free. So you can play like Settlers of Catan, Secret Hitler, all those games. Only buying the base game. You buy Tabletop Simulator, then you can play all the rest for free.
For what?
PC.
PC, tabletop simulator.
Yeah, it should be on Steam as for sure. It's on Steam. I don't know anywhere else.
I think you can get it on tablets too. I think.
Yeah, but people play D&D on it. People play deck builders. As I already mentioned, the other board games. It's very versatile.
So it's board games. Got it. That's why tabletops. I get it now. Tabletop simulator.
Right. That's why I think you can get on tablet as well, because still limited power, but nothing for one of them.
You said it would be evidence for your moral model if all AI developed a moral system that aligns with your moral. How would you delineate between an AI like that and an AI that was intentionally designed to value the opposite? Well, if it was intentionally designed, then it would not work. So it has to be non-guided towards one.
Tom, how you doing?
All right, how are you?
I'm okay. I was just streaming when you did the interview, so I've not had time to watch it yet. But how do you feel like it went? If you've not already talked about that to death.
I think it went really well. Like, I think it definitely, I think I showed that I could mimic his position pretty effectively. Just by semantically changing the definitions. I don't think it's particularly difficult to do. I also thought it was interesting. He said that when we got into the argument about is it logically possible to have omnipotence without omniscience, I thought that was a really interesting part of the conversation. I think it's really strange that theists can't find it logically possible to have an omnipotent thing that isn't conscious. I thought that was an interesting thing. And then the tropes part, I think that was a unique part, because I had never, that's not an argument any theist has brought up before, where the tropes as a thing in metaphysics, because one of his arguments is that the reason it's reasonable to accept the hypothesis he's positing is because it fits into our background knowledge, and background knowledge is acceptable if it's something accepted in the field of metaphysics, and tropes is such a thing. So that's not an argument I've heard before, and so he's going to send me his paper, and I'll look into the tropes thing to see if that can be mirrored, which it probably can. But that is
That's what he means by accepted there as well, because it's not like it's an uncontentious take. You know, like it's one available take, but it's not like it's a settled discussion or something.
Yeah, he's just saying that anything can qualify as background knowledge if it's accepted to be able to have some kind of virtue in the field of metaphysics to be able to answer some question, then it's reasonable in some sense. But yeah, the fact that it's not
I see.
widely accepted is definitely, it could be a plausible argument against it. But I brought up the argument that what in my epistemology counts as background knowledge is things that have an empirical basis, things that have made novel predictions in the past. And if it doesn't do that, then it doesn't count as background knowledge. If it doesn't do that, it's essentially no different from fairies or unicorns. And that was probably the main disagreement we had, was his, as long as it is accepted in the field of metaphysics, then it's to have some kind of virtue, then it's acceptable background knowledge. And I think that's not true.
Did you ask him at all, or talk about the idea of it being marketed as like a new argument for God?
No, because I mean, I can see that his methodology is in some sense new in that he's using the tropes thing. His connection to tropes is definitely new. That is definitely a new part of the argument. His version is some kind of mix of contingency and ontological, so it's in that sense it's not new, but his use of tropes is definitely new. Like, I've never heard tropes being posited as a reasonable thing to use as a basis to come up with some kind of metaphysical explanation before, so that part's new.
So how did he get from tropes to God then?
God is a
just
trope.
that they need to be grounded. Oh, okay, right.
So yeah, his argument is that his argument had like 3 or 4 parts that we went into, the parts that I mirrored. There was a whole bunch more parts in his definition of what qualifies as a trope that we didn't get into. So in the 2 hours we talked, we went through the 4 parts of his argument. That starts with the definition of God, which is omnipotent and perfectly good. And then there was a working hypothesis, which was I forget the word, it starts with the D, but it means that anything that is good will expand its goodness, or goodness diffusion. That's it. Diffusion principle of like goodness diffuses. And he says then he has an assumption where existence is good. Therefore, there's an entailment that because God is definitionally omnipotent, which requires him to do all perfectly good actions, and with the working principle that goodness diffuses, he will necessarily create existence because it entails goodness. That was his argument, essentially.
But I find those views interesting as well, because it's like, so I guess you could say God still freely creates, but it's like God had to create. Seems more like a kind of machine or something, than a sort of personal agent doing something with their free will.
Yeah, I think he'd probably take the route of he has the desire, but he doesn't actually take the action without his freeness capability. So his freeness capability allows him to take the action. Kind of gibberish. Yeah, I think it was a good conversation overall. Definitely productive. Not like my past 2 with the Muslims. Those were not productive.
I'll have to watch it back then and see where it goes, because I've seen him, going around on a few of the Christian channels, and obviously the Christian channels, being what they are kind of like marketing it as like this new incredible thing. But I've not really paid much attention to its contents. But it seems like there might be some interesting parts to it there. But I think it sounds as well like it's going to have all the same problems as all of these arguments, right? Which is that there's a bunch of really contentious metaphysics involved. It doesn't necessarily get you to the Christian God, and it's not convincing for the vast majority of people. And you need to study like tons of philosophy just to even be able to understand what the argument's getting at, which is maybe a knock against like if it's meant to convince ordinary people of God's existence.
Yep, I think it definitely, all of those would be valid criticisms of the argument for sure, especially the tropes references. And I would say that, I think the bigger problem is that it's not justified to say that metaphysical concepts act as some kind of justification for knowledge beliefs in that sense. The fact that philosophers think that these metaphysical concepts are useful in describing stuff, I don't think actually means that they're reasonable to believe are true. I think they're more just abstract labels we apply to things, which would more likely correspond to some physical field of some kind. Reality is probably going to describe this. Physics is probably going to describe this, not philosophical concepts. So I don't think trusting in the philosophical labels we make up is a reliable way to gain knowledge.
So was that something that came up in the conversation? Sort of
lots.
Was he saying like this is the way the world, this metaphysical story is the way that the world has to be in order for us to have knowledge? Or is that something?
No.
Out of what you just said?
He was saying that this metaphysical story of tropes is a justified way to establish knowledge because it fits it's something that qualifies as background knowledge. If you can make up these metaphysical stories, it qualifies as background knowledge, which is one of the 4 criteria he established as what determines a good explanation or good hypothesis.
Right, and then God is one of them, and you get it for free somehow. I mean, I'll have to listen back and see what's said specifically, but
yeah. So he did the classical Bayesian things, the simplicity. I think there's another S in there. Predictive power, background knowledge, and I forget the 4th one. But we never talked about the bottom 2. We only talked about predictive power and background knowledge.
He made a Bayesian argument. He put all this in like some kind of Bayesian argument.
No. He's just using the basic criterion of the. Like my problem with Bayesian epistemology is the fact that you can pack all of the dubious claims into the priors to make it seem like the argument is more reasonable than it actually is, because you can say that like one of the things is if it explains the past data, then it has predictive power or explanatory power. So like if there's a gold brick in my room and I make up a hypothesis of a leprechaun who likes gold bricks, that would explain the data of a leprechaun. And so it fits that criteria, the Bayesian criteria of predictive power in that sense, which I think is terrible. Because he's taking it from Swinburne, and Swinburne uses the Bayesian stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I actually saw, I read something recently about, apparently Swinburne says he's doing a lot of stuff, but he's not actually like doing that in terms of the format that he argues in. Like he argues in terms of all these likelihoods, like this is more expected on theism than not theism. But then he says like he's making a C inductive argument, and apparently C inductive arguments are arguments of the form like this raven is black, this raven is black, so all ravens are black, and apparently Swinburne's a bit confused about what he's actually doing in terms of the argument that he's making there. But yeah, I agree with you in terms of those criticisms. The problem with all this Bayesian stuff is it can give some of these theistic arguments a kind of air of credibility, like they're somehow mathematical or they're scientific, and then it requires you just learning a ton of stuff to realize that there's something fishy about it, to be able to put into words exactly what's fishy about it, when you can kind of see that there's something fishy about it from it going on from the start.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's used as like almost a weapon in that way, where it's like, well, now either you're an irrational person, an anti-intellectual and stuff, or you've got to spend like hours and hours and hours reading all this stuff about just to be able to say, like, I don't know what the prior probability of God existing is, so I can't use Bayesianism on this question or something.
Yeah, I think that's a really. I mean, I enjoy that theists do that they put a lot of challenging thought into their arguments to make it look like it's really, really compelling, because it's a fun game to try to decipher that stuff. And so I do think it's deceptive in a way, but it's also fun. I enjoy it. So, but yeah, I think you're right that they hide the fallacy in the arguments to just try and move around the dubious parts of their claims to make them harder to find. And in Bayesian epistemology, it's always in the priors. They just put it in the priors. God just has a really high probability, therefore it's fine. It's fine.
So it's a really simple theory, though. Anyway, I'm gonna head off, Tom. But yeah, I'll watch that back and see how it goes.
Yep. Let me know what you think. Good talking to you. See you later. All right, guys. I am going to take a nap for an hour before my next thing. I will see you guys later in like an hour. Peace out.